A millionaire allowed a street boy to bring his mother to dinner at his restaurant. When he saw the flashing lights of news vans illuminated the dark windows of Culinary Crown, casting eerie shadows across what was usually Chicago's most prestigious dining establishment. Health inspectors in white hazmat suits moved methodically through the kitchen, their faces grim as they documented each violation. In the center of the chaos stood Levi Taylor, his chef's whites immaculate but his face ashen with disbelief. "Mr. Taylor, we found evidence of deliberate contamination," Inspector Sarah Rodriguez stated, holding up a Petri dish containing samples from the walk-in refrigerator. "The bacterial levels are too consistent to be accidental. Someone has been systematically introducing harmful substances into your food storage areas." Levi's world spun. Just yesterday, Culinary Crown had been preparing for a visit from the James Beard Foundation. Now, cameras were rolling as officers sealed off his kitchen with yellow tape. Through the window, he could see the growing crowd of onlookers, some former patrons among them, their faces a mix of shock and disappointment. "This is impossible," Levy managed, his voice hoarse. "We have strict protocols." Chef Taylor, a reporter, thrust a microphone toward his face. "Sources claim you've been cutting corners to fund your homeless outreach program. Any comment on allegations that you've been serving contaminated food to unsuspecting customers?" Before Levi could respond, he caught sight of Marcus, his head chef, slipping out the back door. Their eyes met briefly, and in that moment Levi saw something that made his blood run cold, not guilt, but satisfaction. The realization hit him like a physical blow. This wasn't just a health code violation, it was sabotage. But why? And why now, when Penelope and Hudson were finally starting to rebuild their lives? As if summoned by his thoughts, Penelope burst through the crowd, Hudson close behind her. The boy's face crumpled at the sight of the chaos, and Levi felt his heart break. They had worked so hard to create a safe haven, a family, and now it was all unraveling before their eyes. "Levi," Penelope whispered, reaching for his hand. "What's happening?" Before he could answer, Inspector Rodriguez emerged from the kitchen with a final damning piece of evidence, a small vial, half hidden behind the spice rack, its contents still unknown but its presence unmistakably sinister. "Culinary Crown is hereby closed indefinitely," she announced, her voice carrying across the now silent restaurant, "pending a full investigation." Tragedy struck Levi Taylor's life before he could form his first memories. On a rain-slicked Chicago highway, a devastating accident claimed the lives of both his parents, leaving him an orphan at just 13 months old. His grandmother, Sarah Taylor, a former line cook with calloused hands and an unwavering spirit, stepped in to raise him in their small apartment on the city's south side. The apartment was modest, a cramped two-room space with peeling wallpaper and temperamental plumbing, but Sarah transformed it into a home through the magic of her cooking. Even in their direst financial moments, when the electricity bills loomed and grocery money ran thin, she managed to create meals that filled both their bellies and their hearts. The aromatic blend of herbs and spices became Levi's earliest memories, a sensory comfort that would shape his future. Sarah worked multiple jobs to keep them afloat, leaving young Levi alone more often than she would have liked. During these solitary hours, he found himself drawn to the kitchen, attempting to recreate the comfort he felt when his grandmother cooked. His first culinary experiment at age 7, a disastrous attempt at pancakes that left a permanent scorch mark on their second-hand stove, earned him not a scolding, but a patient lesson in proper heat control and timing. The financial struggles intensified as Levi entered his teenage years. There were nights when dinner consisted of little more than seasoned rice and whatever vegetables Sarah could salvage from the grocery store's discount bin. Yet she never let Levi feel the full weight of their poverty. Instead, she turned their circumstances into teaching moments, showing him how to coax flavor from the humblest ingredients. "It's not about what you have," she would say, demonstrating how to transform stale bread into a bread pudding that tasted like heaven It's about understanding your ingredients and treating them with respect. School was another battlefield altogether. Levy's worn clothes and inability to participate in paid activities marked him as an outsider. The other kids mocked his free lunch status and the fact that he couldn't afford the latest trends. But in the school's home economics class, Levy found his sanctuary. While other students treated cooking assignments as a chore, he approached them with the same reverence he'd learned from Sarah. At 15, tragedy struck again. Sarah suffered a severe stroke, leaving her partially paralyzed and unable to work. The medical bills threatened to drown them, and for the first time, Levi saw real fear in his grandmother's eyes. Determined to help, he lied about his age to secure a dishwashing job at a local diner. The work was grueling, long hours of steam, suds, and heavy lifting, but being in a professional kitchen, even at its lowest rung, felt right. The diner's cook, an old-school veteran named Mike, noticed Levy's intense interest in the culinary arts. During slow periods, he began teaching the boy basic knife skills and cooking techniques. Levi absorbed every lesson like a sponge, staying late after shifts to practice and learn more. His natural talent, combined with the foundational skills Sarah had taught him, quickly became apparent. When Sarah discovered his secret job, instead of anger, she showed pride. "You have the hands of a chef," she told him, examining his growing collection of minor burns and cuts. "But promise me you'll finish school. Education is the one thing nobody can take from you." Levi kept his promise, juggling schoolwork with his kitchen duties, often studying by candlelight when they couldn't pay the electric bill. The turning point came during his senior year when Mike helped him secure a scholarship to a local culinary program. For the first time, Levi saw a clear path forward. The scholarship wouldn't cover all his expenses, but he was used to making something from nothing. He continued working while attending classes, sending every spare dollar home to Sarah for her medical care. His grandmother's condition gradually improved, though she never fully recovered her mobility. On the day Levi graduated from culinary school, she managed to attend the ceremony, wheeling herself to the front row to watch him receive his diploma. "Your parents would be so proud," she whispered as she hugged him afterward, her eyes glistening with tears. "You've taken all the hardship life threw at you and turned it into something beautiful." Those early years of struggle and perseverance shaped not just Levy's culinary skills, but his entire approach to life. He learned that true wealth wasn't measured in dollars, but in the ability to create something meaningful from whatever resources were available. The lessons of his childhood resilience, creativity, and the transformative power of food would become the foundation upon which he would build his future empire. Penelope Clark's story was one of meteoric rise and devastating fall. At 35, she had achieved everything she'd dreamed of: executive chef position at the Copper Pot, Chicago's most innovative restaurant, multiple James Beard nominations, and a reputation for mentoring young culinary talent. Her kitchen was a sanctuary of creativity and excellence, where she transformed raw recruits into culinary artists. But one chance meeting would unravel everything she'd spent decades building. James Mitchell swept into her life like a summer storm, charming and unpredictable. A real estate developer with dreams of revolutionizing the restaurant industry, he dazzled Penelope with his vision of a nationwide chain of high-end establishments that would combine her culinary expertise with his business acumen. His confidence was infectious, his ambition matching her own drive for excellence. When he proposed after 6 months of whirlwind romance, Penelope said yes, believing she'd found someone who truly understood both her heart and her ambitions. The first warning signs appeared during the wedding planning. James insisted on an extravagant ceremony, brushing aside her concerns about the cost. "We'll make it back tenfold once our restaurants take off," he assured her, signing contracts with expensive vendors without consulting her. Penelope ignored her instincts, attributing his behavior to pre-wedding excitement. Their first year of marriage brought both joy and strain. Penelope became pregnant with Hudson, and James's initial excitement about fatherhood seemed to validate her faith in him. But behind the scenes, his business dealings grew increasingly erratic. The location he'd chosen for their flagship restaurant fell through, but instead of regrouping, he borrowed heavily from questionable sources to secure an even more expensive property. Hudson's birth should have been their happiest moment, but James was distracted, frantically trying to keep their financial house of cards from collapsing. When their primary investors pulled out, citing concerns about James's management style, he turned to alcohol to cope with the stress. Penelope watched helplessly as the charming, ambitious man she'd married transformed into someone she barely recognized. The breaking point came during a construction site inspection. James, desperate to cut corners and save money, ignored basic safety protocols. The resulting accident left him with a severely damaged spine and a prescription pain medication dependency that would evolve into a full-blown addiction. Medical bills mounted, creditors called constantly, and James's behavior became increasingly erratic and sometimes violent. Penelope tried everything to hold their family together. She took extra catering jobs, sold her prized cookbook collection, even reached out to her old contacts in the industry. But James's addiction consumed everything: money, hope, and eventually their safety. He began stealing her earnings to feed his habit, flying into rages when she confronted him about missing funds or missed appointments with Hudson's pediatrician. The final straw came on Hudson's 7th birthday. Penelope had saved for weeks to buy him a junior chef's kit, knowing his growing interest in cooking. James, in a drug-induced haze, sold it for a fraction of its value to buy pills. When Penelope found Hudson crying in his room, something inside her snapped. That night, as James lay unconscious on the couch, she packed 2 small bags, one for her, one for Hudson. The escape was not clean or simple. James's connections to the Syndicate, a criminal organization that had funded his failed ventures, meant they couldn't just disappear. Penelope and Hudson moved frequently, staying in cheap motels and shelters, always looking over their shoulders. She took whatever work she could find: washing dishes, waiting tables, cooking at greasy spoons, jobs that would have been beneath her in her previous life but now meant survival. The hardest part wasn't the poverty or the constant moving, it was watching Hudson try to process their situation. He developed a habit of hoarding food in his pockets, started flinching at loud noises, and would wake up crying from nightmares about his father finding them. Penelope's heart broke every time she had to enroll him in a new school, watching him try to explain to new friends why he couldn't invite them over, or why he wore the same clothes several days in a row. Eventually, they made their way back to Chicago, the only place Penelope had ever felt truly at home. But the city had changed, or perhaps she had. The vibrant culinary scene that had once been her kingdom now seemed like a distant dream. Her hands, once praised for their artistic plating and knife skills, grew rough from harsh cleaning chemicals and repetitive prep work. Her confidence, once unshakable, eroded with each job application rejected, each former colleague who pretended not to recognize her. Yet through it all, Hudson remained her anchor. His resilience, his ability to find joy in small moments, kept her going. When he would sit at their tiny apartment's kitchen counter, watching her transform their meager groceries into something edible, his eyes shining with the same passion for cooking she'd once had, Penelope found the strength to keep fighting. She might have lost her empire, but she hadn't lost everything. She still had her son, and as long as that was true, there was hope for redemption. At 12 years old, Hudson Mitchell carried burdens far beyond his years. Behind his quiet demeanor and watchful eyes lay a complex web of trauma, secrets, and an unwavering determination to protect what remained of his family. His earliest memories were tainted by the sound of arguments, the sight of his father's transformation from a successful businessman to a hollow-eyed stranger, and the constant fear that seemed to permeate their home. Hudson learned to read his father's moods like a survival manual. The way James walked through the door, the rhythm of his breathing, the subtle shake in his hands, each detail could predict whether the evening would bring violence or eerie calm. He became an expert at making himself invisible, disappearing into his room when the storms of his father's addiction raged through their house. During these moments, he would often press his hands against his ears and recite cooking measurements he'd learned from Penelope, finding comfort in their precise, orderly nature. School became both a refuge and a battlefield. In class, Hudson excelled, throwing himself into his studies with an intensity that concerned his teachers. It was easier to focus on mathematics and science than to think about the chaos at home. But lunch periods and recess exposed the social gulf between him and his peers. His worn clothes, his inability to participate in after-school activities, and his reluctance to invite friends over marked him as different. The bullying started subtly whispered comments about his shabby backpack, invitations to birthday parties that mysteriously got lost, partners who refused to work with him on group projects. Hudson endured it silently, developing a thick skin that no child should need. When things got particularly bad, he would retreat to the school library, losing himself in cookbooks and dreaming of a future where he could create beautiful things like his mother did. What nobody knew, not even Penelope, was that Hudson had discovered the truth about his birth mother during one of his father's drug-fueled rants. Sarah Mitchell, a young waitress at one of James's previous restaurants, had disappeared shortly after Hudson's birth, leaving only a note relinquishing all parental rights. Penelope had stepped in, adopting Hudson and loving him as her own, never treating him as anything less than her son. Hudson kept this knowledge locked away, terrified that revealing it might somehow break the only stable parent relationship he had ever known. The constant moving after their escape from James took its toll. Each new school meant another round of explanations, another set of curious stares, another group of potential friends who might disappear with the next midnight move. Hudson developed a system: don't unpack completely, don't get too close to anyone, don't let teachers see the darkness that sometimes threatened to overwhelm him. He became adept at forging his father's signature on school forms, explaining away missed parent-teacher conferences, and hiding the fact that sometimes dinner was whatever he could buy from a vending machine with loose change. But amid the chaos and uncertainty, Hudson found unexpected strength in his love for cooking. Like Penelope, he discovered that even the simplest ingredients could be transformed with enough care and attention. He started small, helping with prep work, learning knife skills, memorizing recipes. In the kitchen, the world made sense. There were rules to follow, predictable chemical reactions, measurable results. It became his way of maintaining control in a life that offered very little. When Levi entered their lives, Hudson approached him with the cautious skepticism of a child who had learned that adult promises often shattered. But there was something different about Levi. Perhaps it was the way he treated cooking with the same reverence Hudson felt, or how he never pushed for more trust than Hudson was ready to give. Their connection grew organically, built on shared passion and understanding rather than obligation. Levi seemed to instinctively understand Hudson's need for stability and routine. He created a special spot for Hudson in Culinary Crown's kitchen, a small workstation where the boy could practice his skills under the watchful eyes of professional chefs. More importantly, he offered Hudson something he desperately craved: a male role model who demonstrated that strength could exist without violence, that success didn't have to come at the cost of others' happiness. Yet beneath Hudson's growing confidence and adaptation to their new life lurked constant fear. Fear that James would find them, that the syndicate's threats would materialize, that this newfound stability was as temporary as all the others. He began having nightmares about losing Penelope and Levi, waking up in cold sweats, his heart racing with the terror of being alone again. The weight of his secrets about his birth mother, about some of the darker things he'd witnessed during his father's addiction, about the deep-seated fear that he might somehow be responsible for their family's troubles, grew heavier with each passing day. But watching Penelope and Levi together, seeing how they supported each other through their own struggles, gave Hudson something he'd almost forgotten how to feel: hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, this time the happiness would last. Marcus Wright harbored a secret that poisoned his every interaction at Culinary Crown. As James Mitchell's half-brother, he carried the weight of a shared troubled past and a mission of vengeance. Their father, a prominent Chicago businessman, had abandoned Marcus's mother when she was pregnant, going on to marry James's mother and providing James with every advantage while Marcus grew up in poverty. The brothers' paths crossed briefly in their youth, but James, wrapped in privilege, never recognized his half-sibling. Marcus spent years honing his culinary skills, quietly tracking his brother's rise and fall, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. When Marcus secured the position of head chef at Culinary Crown, it wasn't just his impressive resume that got him the job. He had carefully orchestrated his career to intersect with Levi's rising star, knowing that the restaurant would eventually draw Penelope back into its orbit. His resentment festered as he watched Levi's success, seeing in it echoes of the opportunities denied to him. The elaborate sabotage of the restaurant's hygiene standards wasn't just about revenge, it was about destroying everything his half-brother had touched, including Penelope and Hudson. James Mitchell's descent into criminality began long before his addiction. The Syndicate, a sophisticated criminal organization masquerading as a legitimate business consortium, had identified him as a potential asset early in his real estate career. They appreciated his combination of charm, ambition, and moral flexibility. What started as simple money laundering through his development projects evolved into deeper involvement. The accident that left him dependent on pain medication wasn't entirely accidental, it was the Syndicate's way of ensuring his complete dependence on them. The Syndicate itself operated like a shadow government within Chicago's business community. Led by the enigmatic Richard Kane, a third-generation crime boss who had modernized the organization's operations, they specialized in infiltrating legitimate businesses through debt manipulation and blackmail. Kane had a particular interest in the restaurant industry, seeing it as an ideal vehicle for laundering money and extending influence. Culinary Crown's success and Levi's refusal to bow to pressure had made it a target long before Penelope's return. Sarah Taylor, Levi's grandmother, harbored her own painful secrets. After her stroke, unable to bear becoming a burden to her grandson, she had arranged to be placed in a modest nursing home without telling him. She followed his rising career through newspaper clippings and magazine articles, proud of his success but convinced that her presence would only complicate his life. The staff at Sunset Grove Care Home knew her as the quiet woman who spent hours watching cooking shows, occasionally offering expert commentary on technique and seasoning. The web of relationships connecting these characters grew more complex with Detective Laura Chen's involvement. As head of Chicago PD's organized crime unit, she had spent years building a case against the Syndicate. Her interest in Culinary Crown wasn't just professional, her younger sister had been one of the Syndicate's victims driven to suicide after they destroyed her small business. Chen saw in Levi and Penelope's struggle an opportunity to finally bring down the organization that had eluded justice for so long. The Syndicate's influence extended deep into city government through Alexander Burke, a health department official who had been compromised years ago through a combination of blackmail and bribery. Burke's role in facilitating the health code crisis at Culinary Crown was carefully orchestrated, timed to coincide with Marcus's sabotage efforts. His own daughter's mounting medical bills made him an easy target for manipulation, forcing him to choose between his integrity and his child's survival. Interwoven with these adult conflicts was the story of Emily Chen, Detective Chen's daughter and Hudson's classmate at Lakeside Academy. Emily recognized in Hudson the same quiet strength she saw in her mother, and their friendship became a source of hope for both children. Unknown to their parents, Emily and Hudson formed a secret alliance, sharing information and supporting each other through their respective family crises. The nursing home where Sarah Taylor resided held another key player in this complex drama. Margaret Foster, a retired judge who had once presided over cases involving the Syndicate, recognized Sarah from news coverage of Levi's success. Foster's own grandson had been lost to addiction, and she saw in Levi's story a chance for redemption, Her legal knowledge and connections would prove invaluable as events unfolded. These supporting characters, each carrying their own wounds and motivations, created a complex tapestry of relationships that would ultimately determine the fate of Culinary Crown and its extended family. Their individual stories of loss, betrayal, and hope intertwined with the main narrative, adding layers of complexity to what might otherwise have been a simple tale of restaurant rivalry. Their presence ensured that every decision, every conflict, rippled outward to affect not just the principal players but the entire community they had built around them. The winter wind whipped mercilessly through Chicago's downtown streets as Hudson Mitchell huddled in the shadow of a gleaming office building, his small cardboard box of homemade sweets clutched tightly against his chest. At 12 years old, he had mastered the art of becoming nearly invisible while still catching the eye of potential customers. His mother's recipes, carefully executed in their tiny apartment kitchen during the pre-dawn hours, had produced a modest selection of chocolate chip cookies and caramel squares that he hoped would bring in enough money to help with this month's rent. The location he'd chosen wasn't random. Culinary Crown stood across the street, its elegant facade and warm lighting a stark contrast to his current position. Hudson had spent days observing the restaurant's clientele, noting their expensive clothes and casual way of handling money. These were people who might spare a few dollars for a child selling homemade treats, especially if they were already in a good mood from a fine dining experience. His first few attempts at sales that morning had been disappointing. Despite practicing his pitch in the mirror, "Would you like to buy some homemade sweets? They're really good," I promise, most people hurried past without a second glance. Some gave him pitying looks, others seemed annoyed by his presence, and one woman had even suggested he should be in school instead of begging on the streets. What they couldn't know was that Hudson had already attended his morning classes, rushing through lunch period to make it downtown for the restaurant's lunch rush. His teachers had noticed his increasing absences during afternoon sessions, but he'd become adept at forging excuse notes in his mother's handwriting. The guilt of deception weighed heavily on him, but the sight of Penelope's exhausted face as she counted their dwindling savings steeled his resolve. The treats themselves were a testament to both necessity and ingenuity. Penelope taught him how to maximize their limited ingredients, using brown sugar instead of white to add depth to the cookies, carefully controlling the temperature of their temperamental oven to achieve the perfect chewy texture. Each item was wrapped individually in wax paper saved from their own groceries, presented as professionally as their circumstances allowed. As the afternoon wore on, Hudson's hopes began to fade with the winter sunlight. His fingers had grown numb despite the thin gloves he wore, and his box was still more than half full. He thought about the electricity bill waiting at home, its red final notice stamp a constant source of anxiety. Just as he was considering calling it a day, a tall figure in an immaculate chef's coat emerged from Culinary Crown. Levi Taylor walked with the confident stride of someone completely at ease in their environment, but there was something in his expression, a flash of recognition, perhaps as his eyes met Hudson's. Instead of passing by like so many others, Levi changed course and approached the boy's makeshift stand. "Hello there," Levi said, crouching down slightly to meet Hudson's eye level. "What kind of sweets do you have?" The genuine interest in his voice caught Hudson off guard. Most adults either ignored him completely or spoke with condescending pity. "I have chocolate chip cookies and caramel squares," Sahi replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "They're my mom's recipes. She used to be a chef." Something flickered in Levi's eyes at those words, but Hudson was too focused on making the sale to notice. He carefully opened his box, revealing the neatly wrapped treats inside. The winter air carried the faint aroma of vanilla and caramel, a small reminder of warmer, happier times in his mother's kitchen. Levi bought several pieces, intentionally overpaying and refusing change. As he sampled a cookie, his professional assessment was clear in his expression. "These are quite good," he said, and Hudson could tell he meant it. "Did you make these yourself?" The chance encounter that would change all their lives hinged on that moment, a renowned chef tasting a child's humble offerings outside his own restaurant, recognizing not just the skill in their preparation but the desperation that drove their sale. Neither could have known then how their paths would intertwine, or the cascade of events this simple transaction would trigger. The gentle aroma of vanilla and butter lingering on Levi's fingers from Hudson's cookies stirred something deep in his memory. The precise balance of flavors, the subtle caramel undertones, they reminded him of lessons learned long ago in the Copper Pot's kitchen. "You mentioned your mother was a chef," he asked Hudson, an inexplicable urgency creeping into his voice. Before Hudson could respond, a woman's voice cut through the winter air. "Hudson, it's getting dark, you need to come home." The words carried an edge of panic, the kind born from years of constant vigilance. Levi turned toward the sound, and the world seemed to stop turning. Penelope Clark stood at the corner, her once commanding presence diminished but unmistakable. Her chef's whites had been replaced by worn jeans and a faded waitress uniform, her formerly perfect posture now slightly stooped, as if carrying an invisible weight. But her eyes, those fierce, determined eyes that had guided Levi through countless culinary challenges, remained unchanged. "Penelope," Levi whispered, his voice catching in his throat. He took an unconscious step forward, watching as recognition and fear battled across his former mentor's face. For a moment, she looked ready to flee, her hand reaching protectively toward Hudson. Mom Hudson's confused voice broke the tension. "Do you know him?" Penelope's laugh was brittle, edged with hysteria. "Know him? I taught him everything he knows." Her eyes never left Levi's face, searching for judgment or pity, ready to defend against either. Or at least I used to, before. The unfinished sentence hung between them, heavy with years of unspoken history. Levi's mind raced through calculations. How long had it been? 7 years since she'd disappeared from the Copper Pot, leaving only a hastily scrawled resignation letter. 7 years of unanswered calls and returned letters. 7 years of wondering what had happened to the woman who had shaped his culinary destiny. "You look," Levi started, then stopped, realizing there was no diplomatic way to finish that sentence. Penelope's appearance spoke volumes about whatever hardships had befallen her. The dark circles under her eyes, the premature grey streaking her hair, the way her clothes hung loose on her frame, each detail told its own story of struggle. Like hell, Penelope finished for him, a ghost of her old wry humor surfacing. "Life hasn't exactly been a 5-star experience lately." She pulled Hudson closer, her protective instinct evident in every movement. "We should go." It was good to see you, Levi." Wait, Levi's voice carried more authority than he intended, earning curious glances from passers-by. He lowered his tone, trying to contain the surge of emotions threatening to overwhelm him. "Please, let me help. Whatever's going on, whatever brought you here, let me help." Penelope's face hardened. "We don't need charity, especially not from..." "From what? Your most successful student?" "The boy you took a chance on when nobody else would." Levi stepped closer, his voice gentle but firm. "You gave me everything, Penelope. A career, a future, a chance to be more than just another kid from the wrong side of town. Let me return the favor." Hudson looked between them, his young face showing wisdom beyond his years. "Mom," he said softly, "maybe we should listen. It's getting colder, and the heat in our apartment." Penelope flinched at her son's words, and Levi saw the moment her resistance began to crack. The proud chef who had once commanded Chicago's most prestigious kitchen was gone, replaced by a mother desperate to protect her child from another cold night. "Just dinner," Levi offered, gesturing toward Culinary Crown. "A warm meal, a chance to talk." No strings attached, he met Penelope's gaze steadily, letting her see the sincerity in his eyes. "You taught me that food is more than sustenance, it's a bridge between people, a way to heal what's broken." Let me build that bridge." The winter wind whipped around them, carrying the promise of snow. Penelope looked at Hudson's hopeful face, then back at Levi. In that moment, she made a decision that would alter all their lives irrevocably. Inside Culinary Crown, Levi led Penelope and Hudson to a private dining room, away from the curious stares of regular patrons. The contrast between the restaurant's opulent interior and Penelope's worn appearance seemed to heighten her discomfort. Hudson, however, gazed around in wonder, his eyes drinking in every detail of the professional kitchen visible through the glass partition. "You've done well for yourself," Penelope said softly, running her finger along the fine linen tablecloth. Her voice carried a complex mixture of pride and pain. "This is exactly the kind of place I always imagined you'd create." Levi watched as she unconsciously straightened her posture, muscle memory from her days as an executive chef briefly overriding years of hardship. "None of this would exist without you," he replied, signaling to the staff to begin serving. "Everything I am, everything I built, it started in your kitchen." The first course arrived, a delicate butternut squash soup that had been one of Penelope's signature dishes at the Copper Pot. Her eyes widened in recognition, and for a moment she was transported back to happier times. Hudson, sensing the emotional weight of the moment, remained unusually quiet as he savored each spoonful. "Let me help you get back on your feet," Levi said, choosing his words carefully. "I have connections throughout the city's restaurant scene. One word from me, and you could have your pick of executive chef positions. Your talent hasn't disappeared, Penelope. It's just been dormant." Penelope's spoon clattered against the bowl. "It's not that simple, Levi. There are complications. Things you don't understand." Her eyes darted toward the door, a habit born from years of looking over her shoulder. "Then help me understand," Levi pressed gently. "Start with the basics. Where are you living? What kind of work are you doing now?" Hudson answered before his mother could stop him. "We have a small apartment, but the heating doesn't work right. Mom works double shifts at Joe's Diner, and sometimes she cleans offices at night." His voice carried no self-pity, just a matter-of-fact acceptance that made the situation even more heartbreaking. Hudson Penelope warned, but Levi was already shaking his head. "That's not acceptable," he stated firmly. "I have a furnished apartment above the restaurant that's sitting empty. It's yours if you want it. And as for work," he gestured around them. "Culinary Crown could use someone with your expertise. We're expanding our menu, developing new concepts. I need someone I trust to help lead those initiatives." "Levi," Penelope started, but he held up his hand. "Before you say no, think about Hudson. Think about what this could mean for his future." Levi turned to the boy. "I understand you're interested in cooking too." Hudson nodded enthusiastically. "Mom's been teaching me when she can. I want to be a chef like her, like both of you." "Then it's settled," Levi declared. "You'll have access to our kitchen for training, and I'll arrange for you to attend Lakeside Academy. They have an excellent culinary arts program for younger students." Tears welled in Penelope's eyes. "You don't know what you're offering. There are people, dangerous people, who might..." "Who might what?" Levi's voice was steel wrapped in silk. "Try to hurt you? Try to take what's yours? Let them try. I protect my own, Penelope. You taught me that." The rest of the meal passed in a blur of emotions and memories. With each course, Levi could see Penelope's professional instincts awakening, her comments on presentation and flavor combinations becoming more detailed, more confident. Hudson watched their interaction with growing hope, his young face lighting up at the possibility of a stable future. As they prepared to leave, Levi handed Penelope a key. "The apartment is ready whenever you are. No pressure, no strings attached. Just think about it." He crouched down to Hudson's level. "And you, young man, keep working on those cookies. They show real promise." Standing in the doorway of Culinary Crown, watching Penelope and Hudson disappear into the Chicago night, Levi felt both elation and unease. He had found his mentor, offered her a lifeline, but her cryptic warnings suggested that this reunion might come with unexpected consequences. The envelope arrived at Culinary Crown 3 days after Penelope and Hudson moved into the apartment above the restaurant. Plain white, no return address, just Levi Taylor written in precise block letters. Marcus brought it to Levi's office, his face carefully neutral as he placed it on the desk. Levi's fingers hesitated over the unmarked envelope. Years of success had taught him to trust his instincts, and something about this felt wrong. Inside, he found a single photograph Hudson walking to his first day at Lakeside Academy, his new backpack bright against the morning sun. On the back, written in the same precise handwriting, you don't know what you're getting involved in. Some debts can't be paid with money. His first instinct was to protect Penelope and Hudson, but before he could react, Marcus spoke from the doorway. "There's someone here to see you. Says he represents a business consortium." The way Marcus emphasized the last words carried a clear warning. The man who entered wore an expensive suit that somehow managed to suggest both refinement and menace. "Mr. Taylor," he said, extending a manicured hand. "Richard Kane, I believe we have a mutual friend in Penelope Clark, or should I say Penelope Mitchell." Levi didn't take the offered hand. "I don't discuss my employees with strangers, Mr. Kane." Kane's smile never reached his eyes. Admirable loyalty. "But you see, Mrs. Mitchell's husband James has certain outstanding obligations to my organization. By harboring her and the boy, you've inadvertently involved yourself in a rather complicated situation." "Any obligations James Mitchell has are his problem," Levi replied, his voice steady despite the anger building inside him. "Penelope and Hudson are under my protection now." "Protection?" Kane laughed softly. "Mr. Taylor, you're a chef. A successful one, certainly, but still just a chef. You have no idea what you're up against. The syndicate doesn't take kindly to interference in its affairs." "Is that a threat?" "Consider it friendly advice. Your restaurant is doing well. It would be a shame if certain health code violations were to be discovered, or if your suppliers suddenly became unreliable, or if your customers began experiencing unexpected reactions to their meals." Levi stood slowly, his hands flat on the desk to hide their trembling. "Let me give you some friendly advice in return, Mr. Kane. I grew up fighting for everything I have. I learned early that the only way to deal with bullies is to stand up to them. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave my restaurant. And you're going to forget about Penelope and Hudson." Kane's smile widened fractionally. "You know, James said something similar when he first got involved with us. Such bravado. I wonder if you'll show the same spirit when your precious restaurant burns to the ground, or when that bright young boy has an unfortunate accident on his way to his fancy new school." The threat against Hudson broke something in Levi. In 2 strides, he was around the desk, his face inches from Kane's. "If anything happens to them, anything at all, there won't be a place on earth where you can hide from me. That's not bravado, Mr. Kane. That's a promise." For a moment, tension crackled between them. Then Kane stepped back, straightening his tie with deliberate care. "You've made your choice, Mr. Taylor. I hope you're prepared for the consequences." He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Oh, and do give my regards to Penelope. Tell her James misses his family terribly." After Kane left, Levi sank into his chair, the full weight of what he'd just done settling over him. The photograph of Hudson still lay on his desk, an innocent moment transformed into a sinister warning. His hand reached for the phone, then stopped. How could he tell Penelope that his offer of safety had just made their situation infinitely more dangerous? Outside his office, Marcus watched through the window as Kane's black sedan pulled away from the curb. His hand slipped into his pocket, fingers brushing against his own copy of Hudson's photograph, as he considered whose side he was really on in the brewing war. The first signs of trouble appeared subtly. Small things that could be explained away as coincidences: a delayed produced delivery, a reservation system glitch, a slightly higher than usual number of returned dishes. But Levi, having spent his life in professional kitchens, recognized the pattern emerging beneath these seemingly random occurrences. It started with their premium meat supplier abruptly terminating their contract, citing internal restructuring. The replacement vendor sent cuts that were inconsistent in quality, forcing Levi to revamp the menu on short notice. Then their wine distributor began delivering bottles that didn't match their orders, including several prestigious labels that turned out to be counterfeits. Penelope noticed the changes before anyone else. Her experienced eye caught the slight variations in ingredient quality, the subtle signs of a kitchen under strain. She watched as Levi worked increasingly long hours, trying to maintain the restaurant's standards while dealing with an endless stream of supply chain issues. "They're trying to break us," she said one night, after the last customer had left and they were reviewing the day's problems. "This is how the syndicate operates. They don't just destroy businesses, they dismantle them piece by piece." Levi nodded grimly, showing her the latest reviews on his laptop. Several one-star ratings had appeared online, all following the same pattern: claims of food poisoning, poor service, inflated prices. The reviews were clearly fabricated, but the damage to their reputation was real. "We've lost 30% of our reservations for next month," he admitted, "and our insurance company is asking questions about the sudden increase in customer complaints." Marcus, hovering in the background, watched the exchange with carefully concealed interest. His role in the syndicate's plan was becoming more complicated. Each act of sabotage he facilitated, a misplaced order here, a forgotten temperature check there, carried increasing weight on his conscience, especially as he witnessed Penelope and Hudson's gradual return to happiness. The situation reached a critical point during a private event for the city's most influential food critics. Everything that could go wrong did. The timing between courses was off, wine pairings were mixed up, and the signature dessert, a delicate souffle that had never failed before, collapsed in spectacular fashion. As the critics departed, their disappointment evident, Levi gathered his staff in the kitchen. "I know something's not right," he began, his voice steady despite the exhaustion evident on his face. "These aren't random accidents or coincidences. Someone is deliberately trying to destroy everything we've built." The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus felt the weight of every eye in the room, though no one suspected him yet. He watched as Penelope stepped forward, her chin raised in defiance of the circumstances. "When I first taught Levi," she addressed the staff, "I told him that a kitchen is only as strong as the trust between its members. Right now, that trust is being tested. But we have a choice: we can let these attacks break us, or we can stand together and fight back." Her words sparked something in the kitchen staff. They began sharing stories of strange occurrences they'd noticed: missing prep lists, altered recipes, equipment that had been working perfectly suddenly malfunctioning. A pattern emerged, suggesting an orchestrated campaign of sabotage. Levi listened intently, his mind racing through possibilities. "From now on, we implement buddy systems for all prep work. Nothing leaves the kitchen without double-checking. We document everything: every delivery, every temperature reading, every customer comment. If someone's trying to destroy us, they'll have to work a lot harder." The staff rallied around his words, but the challenges kept mounting. Health inspectors began showing up at odd hours, citing increasingly minor violations. Local newspapers ran stories questioning the restaurant's commitment to food safety. Even their loyal customers started to waver, swayed by the growing cloud of suspicion. One morning, Levi arrived to find the restaurant's windows covered in graffiti: "Food poisoners," sprayed in angry red letters. As he worked to clean it off before Hudson could see it on his way to school, he noticed Marcus watching from across the street, phone in hand. "Need help with that?" Chef Marcus called out, walking over with an expression of practiced concern. Levi paused, studying his head chef's face. Something about Marcus's reaction seemed off, too calculated, too perfect. But before he could pursue that thought, another crisis demanded his attention. Their entire reservation system had crashed, wiping out months of bookings. That evening, as Levi, Penelope, and the senior staff gathered to assess the damage, the true scope of their situation became clear. The restaurant was bleeding money, staff morale was at an all-time low, and their once sterling reputation was in tatters. Maybe Marcus suggested carefully it's time to consider selling, before things get worse. The look Levi and Penelope exchanged spoke volumes. They both knew this was more than just a business under attack. It was an assault on their family, their dreams, their very survival. No, Levi declared, his voice carrying the same determination that had lifted him from poverty to success. We're not giving up. Whatever it takes, whoever's behind this will fight. Culinary Crown isn't just a restaurant, it's a home, a family. And you don't abandon family when things get tough. As the meeting dispersed, Marcus slipped away to make a phone call. In the shadows of the alley behind the restaurant, he reported the day's events to his contact at the syndicate, all while wrestling with the growing realization that he was helping destroy something truly special. The halls of Lakeside Academy had always felt like a different world to Hudson, but never more so than on the morning the video went viral. He first noticed something was wrong when he walked into homeroom and conversations suddenly hushed, replaced by poorly concealed snickers and pointed looks. Emily Chen, his only real friend at the school, rushed to his desk, her face tight with concern. "Hudson, have you seen it?" she whispered, pulling out her phone. "Someone posted a video last night. It's bad." The footage was shaky but clear enough. Hudson selling his homemade sweets outside Culinary Crown, captured weeks ago before Levi had found them. But it wasn't just the video, it was the caption. Charity case alert meet Lakeside's newest scholarship student, from street beggar to private school. Guest standards aren't what they used to be. The comments beneath were worse. Students he'd thought were becoming friends had posted laughing emojis and cruel remarks. Some had added their own videos and photos. Hudson wearing the same shirt 3 days in a row, eating alone in the cafeteria, walking to school because he couldn't afford the bus fare. By lunch period, the story had evolved. Whispers circulated that his mother was a drug addict, that his father was in prison, that they were living in Culinary Crown's storage room. Each new rumor seemed designed to cut deeper than the last. Tyler Matthews, son of the school board president, led the charge. "Hey, street vendor," he called across the cafeteria. "Got any stale cookies to sell today? Or are you too busy being Levi Taylor's charity project?" Hudson tried to maintain his dignity, just as Penelope had taught him. "At least I know how to work for what I want," he replied, his voice steady despite the trembling in his hands. "When was the last time you earned anything on your own?" The punch came without warning. Tyler, enraged by the challenge to his privileged status, lashed out. Hudson, who had learned to fight on much tougher streets, reacted instinctively. When the teachers finally separated them, both boys were bloody, but it was Hudson who was led to the principal's office. Principal Harrison sat behind her massive desk, the viral video playing on her computer screen. "This isn't the sort of behavior we expect at Lakeside," she began, her tone suggesting she was addressing a particularly unpleasant problem. "Perhaps this isn't the right environment for someone with your background." "My background," Hudson's voice cracked. "You mean being poor? Or is it because my mum works in a kitchen instead of sitting on the board of directors?" "Watch your tone, young man. Your presence here was already controversial. This incident, combined with these videos. The other parents are concerned about the school's reputation." Before Hudson could respond, the office door opened. Levi strode in, still wearing his chef's whites, with Penelope right behind him. The principal's demeanor shifted instantly, recognizing the renowned chef whose donations had helped fund the school's new culinary arts wing. "I'd like to hear more about these concerns," Levi said quietly, his calm voice carrying more weight than any shout. "Especially the part where you're considering expelling a student for being the victim of cyberbullying and defending himself against physical assault." Principal Harrison backpedaled quickly. "Mr. Taylor, we have certain standards." Yes, you do, Penelope interrupted, her hand protectively on Hudson's shoulder. Academic standards which Hudson has met and exceeded despite facing challenges your other students couldn't imagine. Or are there other standards we should know about? The meeting that followed was tense. The principal tried to maintain her position, citing school policies and parent complaints, but Levi systematically dismantled each argument. He pulled up Hudson's academic record, showing steady improvement. He presented documentation of Tyler's history of bullying other scholarship students. Finally, he reminded the principal that his continued support of the school hinged on their commitment to genuine diversity and inclusion. Hudson stays, Levi concluded, and I expect a full investigation into who posted that video and who encouraged its spread. Unless you'd prefer I take this to the board or perhaps the media. But even with the immediate crisis averted, the damage was done. Hudson's tentative sense of belonging had been shattered. That evening, as they sat in Levi's office above the restaurant, he finally broke down. Maybe they're right, he sobbed. Maybe I don't belong there. I'm just causing trouble for everyone who tries to help me. Penelope pulled him close, her own eyes wet with tears. You belong anywhere you're willing to work hard and be true to yourself. Those kids, their parents, they're the ones who don't understand what real strength looks like. Levi knelt before Hudson, ensuring the boy met his gaze. When I was your age, I was the scholarship kid too. People said I didn't belong in culinary school, that a poor kid from the South Side could never be a real chef. You know what I did? Hudson shook his head. I proved them wrong. Every single day I proved them wrong. And you're going to do the same thing. Because you're stronger than their judgment, braver than their cruelty, and worth more than their narrow view of the world. As Hudson's tears subsided, a new determination settled over his young features. The scandal had tried to break him, but instead it had revealed the true strength of his newfound family and his own resilience. The truth emerged on a quiet Sunday afternoon when the restaurant was closed for routine maintenance. Penelope was in the kitchen, testing new recipes, while Hudson worked on his homework at a corner table. Levi had just finished reviewing supplier contracts when he noticed Marcus behaving oddly near the walk-in freezer. Through the security cameras, Levi watched as his head chef carefully placed something behind the freezer's temperature control panel. Years of street-honed instincts told him something was wrong. He waited until Marcus left, then investigated the spot. Hidden behind the panel, he found a small device designed to manipulate the freezer's temperature readings. Looking for something, Levi's voice cut through the empty kitchen as Marcus returned. The head chef froze, his hand still reaching toward the panel. I've been wondering how our perfect temperature logs could coexist with spoiled ingredients. Now it all makes sense. Marcus straightened slowly, his facade of loyalty crumbling. You don't understand, he began, but Levi cut him off. Then help me understand. Help me understand why my head chef, someone I trusted with everything I've built, would deliberately sabotage his own kitchen. Help me understand why you've been photographing Hudson, reporting our movements to the syndicate. Penelope emerged from the test kitchen, her face paling as she recognized Marcus's expression. It was eerily similar to one she'd seen on James's face years ago. She whispered, "You're connected to James somehow, aren't you?" Marcus's laugh was bitter, empty of humor. Connected to James? You could say that. He's my half-brother, not that he ever acknowledged me. The golden boy never had time for his father's other son, the mistake that was hidden away in the poor part of town. The revelation hung in the air like a thundercloud. Hudson, who had been quietly observing from his corner, suddenly understood why Marcus had always looked at him with such conflicted emotions. All these years, Marcus continued, his voice rising with suppressed rage, I watched James get everything, the best schools, the best opportunities, even you, Penelope. While our father pretended I didn't exist, James built his empire on the family connections I was denied. And when he finally fell, when his addiction and the syndicate destroyed him, I saw my chance. Chance for what Levy demanded, to destroy innocent people, to terrorize a child, to make him feel what I felt Marcus shouted, to watch his family suffer like I suffered, and he turned to Penelope, who was supposed to stay down, stay broken. But then Levi had to play the hero, had to offer you redemption. Penelope stepped forward, her chef's knife still in hand from her recipe testing. So you decided to destroy Levi too, because he showed kindness where your brother showed cruelty. The syndicate wanted Culinary Crown anyway, Marcus admitted. I just made it easier for them. Every failed health inspection, every bad review, every suspicious incident, all carefully orchestrated to bring down the mighty Levi Taylor and his perfect little family. We trusted you, Levi said quietly, his voice heavy with disappointment. I gave you opportunities, believed in your talent. Was any of it real, Marcus? Or was it all just part of your revenge? Something flickered in Marcus's eyes, regret, perhaps, or the ghost of loyalty not entirely feigned. The cooking was real, he said softly. In the kitchen, creating dishes, teaching the younger chefs, that was real. But every time I saw Hudson, every time I watched you three playing happy families, all I could think about was everything James and I never had. And now, Levi asked, moving subtly to position himself between Marcus and Hudson, what happens now that we know the truth? Marcus pulled out his phone. Now I make one call, and the syndicate takes everything you love. They're just waiting for my signal. Your precious restaurant, your reputation, your freedom, it all ends with one call. Or Penelope interjected, you could help us stop them. Break the cycle of betrayal and hurt. Be better than James, better than your father. For a moment Marcus wavered. Looking at Hudson's face, so young, so reminiscent of his own childhood, something inside him cracked. The phone slipped from his fingers, clattering to the floor. They'll come after me, he whispered, the fight draining from his posture. The syndicate doesn't forgive betrayal. Then help us bring them down, Levi proposed, his voice firm but not unkind. Give us everything you know. Help us end this, not for revenge but for justice, for Hudson and for the boy you once were. As Marcus sank into a kitchen chair, the weight of his choices visible in every line of his body, the truth of their situation became clear. His betrayal had nearly destroyed them, but it had also given them the key to fighting back against the syndicate. The question now was whether they could trust the man who had tried so hard to ruin them. The evening crowd at Culinary Crown had just begun to thin when James Mitchell walked through the front door. Years of addiction had ravaged his once handsome face, but he still carried himself with the dangerous charm that had first captivated Penelope. He was thinner, his expensive suit hanging loosely on his frame, his eyes holding a desperate kind of hunger that had nothing to do with food. Able for one, he announced to the hostess, his voice carrying across the dining room. And please inform Chef Clark that an old friend is here to see her. The effect of his arrival was immediate. Marcus, who had been working with the authorities to build a case against the syndicate, nearly dropped the plate he was carrying. Hudson, doing homework at his usual corner table, looked up and went deathly pale. The boy had learned to fear that voice, to associate it with nights of shouting and the sound of breaking glass. Levi was in his office when the hostess brought the news. He reached for the phone to call the police, but Penelope stopped him. No, she said firmly, I need to face him. We all do. Otherwise we'll never be free. They found James at a center table, perusing the wine list as if he was just another patron. He looked up with a predatory smile as they approached. Penelope, darling, you're looking like exactly what you are, a line cook in someone else's kitchen. What do you want, James? Penelope's voice was steady, though Levi could see her hands trembling slightly. Can't a man check on his family? James's eyes found Hudson, who had unconsciously moved closer to Levi. My son has grown so much, though I hear he's developed some unfortunate habits, selling sweets on the street like a common beggar. Hudson flinched at the words but straightened his spine. At least I was trying to help Mom. What did you ever do except hurt her?" James's face darkened. "Careful, boy, I'm still your father. I have rights." "Rights?" Levy stepped forward. "You lost any rights when you chose drugs over your family, when you let the syndicate turn you into their puppet." "Ah, the famous Chef Taylor." James's smile turned cruel. "My brother's been telling me all about you. Playing savior to my cast-offs, are you? Tell me, what's your real interest in my wife and son?" Before Levy could respond, Marcus emerged from the kitchen. The sight of his half-brother seemed to drain the last color from James's face. "Hello, Brother," Marcus said quietly. "I'm not working for you or the syndicate anymore. It's over." James's composure cracked slightly. "Nothing's over until I say it is. Penelope, Hudson, get your things. We're leaving. The syndicate has graciously offered to relocate us, give us a fresh start." No, Penelope's voice rang out clear and strong. "We're not going anywhere with you. Hudson and I have a home here, a real home, not the prison you created." James stood suddenly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. Several diners turned to stare. "You don't have a choice," he hissed. "The syndicate owns me, which means they own you too, and if you don't come willingly." He reached into his jacket, but before he could pull out whatever weapon he was carrying, Hudson stepped between his parents. "Stop it," the boy shouted, years of fear and anger finally boiling over. "Just stop. You're not my father, you're just the man who hurt my mom and made me afraid to sleep at night. Lever's more of a father to me than you ever were." The restaurant fell silent. James stared at his son as if seeing him for the first time. Something in his expression shifted, a flicker of the man he used to be breaking through the hardened exterior. "Hudson," he whispered, his hand falling away from his jacket. I never meant." "But you did," Penelope cut in. "Every choice you made, every time you chose drugs over us, every deal you made with the syndicate, those were all your decisions. And now we're making ours. Leave, James. Leave us alone." Security guards, quietly summoned by the staff, appeared at James's sides. He looked around the restaurant at Marcus's pity, at Levy's protective stance, at Hudson's defiant tears, at Penelope's unwavering determination, and seemed to deflate. "You'll never be free of them," he said finally. "The syndicate doesn't let go of what it considers its property." "Then we'll fight them," Levi declared. "Together. As a family. Something you never understood the value of." As the guards escorted James out, Hudson buried his face in Penelope's apron, his shoulders shaking. Levi enveloped them both in a protective embrace, while Marcus watched his brother's departure with a mixture of sadness and relief. The restaurant slowly returned to its normal rhythm, but something had fundamentally changed. They had faced their demon and survived, but they all knew this wasn't the end. It was merely the beginning of a larger battle to come. The morning after James's appearance at Culinary Crown, Chicago's most popular morning show, led with a bombshell story: renowned chef accused of kidnapping. The segment featured a tearful James Mitchell, expertly coached by the syndicate's PR team, claiming that Levi Taylor had manipulated a vulnerable woman and her impressionable son, using his wealth and influence to separate a family. "I've been fighting my demons," James told the sympathetic interviewer, his eyes glistening with carefully rehearsed tears. "All I want is a chance to make things right with my family, but Chef Taylor has turned them against me. He's using my son as cheap labor in his restaurant, exploiting my wife's culinary expertise. Is this the kind of man we want representing Chicago's restaurant scene?" The story spread like wildfire. By lunch, protesters had gathered outside Culinary Crown, carrying signs that read "Child labor is wrong" and "Return Hudson to his father." News vans clogged the street, reporters shoving microphones at anyone entering or leaving the restaurant. Levi's legal team worked frantically to contain the damage. They released documentation of James's arrest record, medical records showing Hudson's hospital visits during his father's violent episodes, police reports filed by Penelope. But the syndicate's influence ran deep. Somehow, these documents were suppressed or discredited, while James's version of events dominated the headlines. Detective Laura Chen, watching the media circus unfold, recognized the syndicate's tactics. "They're trying to force you into the open," she explained during a tense meeting in Levi's office. "If they can't destroy you through health code violations and sabotage, they'll do it through public opinion." Penelope, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly spoke up. "Then let's give them what they want, but on our terms." Her voice carried a strength that surprised everyone. "I'll tell my story, all of it. The abuse, the addiction, the syndicate's role in James's downfall. Let the public hear the truth." The decision to go public was not made lightly. Hudson would be exposed to more scrutiny, and the syndicate's retaliation would be swift. But as Penelope pointed out, they were already under attack. At least this way they could control the narrative. They chose a respected investigative journalist, Catherine Wells, known for her exposures on corruption. Over 3 days, she interviewed everyone: Penelope, Hudson, Levi, Marcus, even former employees from the Copper Pot, who remembered Penelope's sudden disappearance. The resulting article, "The Price of Freedom: A Family's Fight Against Chicago's Criminal Underground," ran in the Sunday edition of the Tribune. The story was explosive. It detailed the syndicate's method of targeting vulnerable businesses, using addiction and debt to control their victims. James's carefully crafted image of a repentant father crumbled as evidence of his past violence came to light. Most damaging were the financial records Marcus provided, showing the syndicate's complex money laundering operation through various restaurants. The syndicate's response was immediate and brutal. Their lawyers filed defamation suits against the Tribune, Penelope, and Levi. Health inspectors appeared daily, nitpicking every detail of Culinary Crown's operation. Anonymous sources began contacting other newspapers with stories of food poisoning, workplace abuse, and financial misconduct. But something unexpected happened. Other victims of the syndicate began coming forward. Restaurant owners shared stories of similar experiences: the loans that couldn't be repaid, the mysterious accidents, the gradual takeover of their businesses. Former employees of syndicate-controlled establishments provided evidence of health code violations being covered up through bribes. Detective Chen's investigation gained new momentum as witnesses finally felt safe enough to testify. The FBI became involved, seeing an opportunity to crack open a major racketeering case. Suddenly, the syndicate found itself fighting battles on multiple fronts. The turning point came during a televised interview where James, under pressure from aggressive questioning, lost his composure. His mask of contrition slipped, revealing the rage beneath. When the interviewer pressed him about Hudson's medical records, he exploded, threatening her on live television. The outburst confirmed everything Penelope had claimed about his violent tendencies. Public opinion began to shift. Local restaurants organized a show of support for Culinary Crown, with renowned chefs speaking out against the syndicate's intimidation tactics. The protesters outside the restaurant were replaced by supporters, including many of Hudson's classmates from Lakeside Academy. Through it all, Levi, Penelope, and Hudson maintained their dignity. They continued serving exceptional meals, treating each guest with respect, letting their actions speak louder than any media statement. Hudson's grades remained exemplary, proving that he was thriving, not being exploited. The legal battles dragged on, draining resources and energy. The syndicate's lawyers employed every delaying tactic possible, hoping to bankrupt Culinary Crown through legal fees alone. But they hadn't counted on the community's response. A crowdfunding campaign, started by regular customers, helped cover legal expenses. Local suppliers offered generous credit terms. Even competing restaurants sent their overflow customers to Culinary Crown in a show of solidarity. As winter turned to spring, the tide of the media war definitively turned. The syndicate's carefully constructed narrative collapsed under the weight of mounting evidence. James's public appearances became increasingly erratic, his claims more desperate. Each new revelation strengthened Penelope and Hudson's case while exposing more of the syndicate's criminal enterprise. In the midst of the chaos, Culinary Crown became more than just a restaurant. It became a symbol of resistance against corruption, of a family's courage to stand against overwhelming odds. The very publicity that the syndicate had weaponized against them became their strongest defense, making it impossible for their enemies to act without scrutiny. The truth about Hudson's birth mother emerged in the most unexpected way. During the legal proceedings against the syndicate, Detective Chen's team uncovered a file in James's old office that contained adoption papers, medical records, and a series of letters. The discovery landed on Levi's desk one quiet morning, contained in a plain manila envelope marked confidential. As he read through the documents, the color drained from his face. Sarah Mitchell hadn't simply disappeared. After Hudson's birth, she had been a waitress at one of the syndicate's restaurants, forced into giving up her child through a combination of threats and bribes. The letters revealed a young woman's desperate attempts to maintain some connection with her son, all of them intercepted and hidden by James. Levy sat in his office for hours, wrestling with the weight of this information. Hudson had a right to know his true history, but the revelation could shatter the boy's already fragile sense of security. More concerning was how Penelope would handle the news. Would it change her feelings for the child she had raised as her own? The decision was taken out of his hands when Hudson himself walked into the office, looking for help with his homework. The boy's eyes immediately fixed on the documents spread across Levy's desk, recognizing his own baby photos among them. "What are those?" Hudson asked, his voice small but steady. Before Levy could respond, Penelope appeared in the doorway, sensing something significant was unfolding. "Sit down," Levi said gently. "Both of you. There's something we need to discuss." As he explained what the investigators had found, Hudson's expression remained surprisingly calm. "I already knew," he said quietly when Levi finished. "Dad James, he told me once when he was really high. He said I wasn't really Mom's son, that she just took me in because she felt sorry for me." Penelope's sob broke the tension in the room. She rushed to Hudson, pulling him into a fierce embrace. "You are my son," she declared, her voice fierce with emotion. "Maybe I didn't give birth to you, but I have loved you every single day of your life. Nothing will ever change that." Hudson clung to her, finally allowing his own tears to fall. "I was so scared to tell you that I knew. I thought maybe you'd stop loving me if you knew I wasn't really yours." "Oh, Hudson," Penelope whispered, stroking his hair. "You became mine the moment I first held you. Blood doesn't make a family, love does." Levi watched their exchange with a mix of relief and concern. "There's more," he said carefully. "Sarah Mitchell, your birth mother, she's alive. And according to these letters, she's been trying to find you." The revelation hung in the air like a physical presence. Hudson pulled back slightly from Penelope's embrace, his young face a battlefield of conflicting emotions. Does she want to meet me?" "Only if you want to," Levi assured him quickly. "No one will force you to do anything you're not ready for." Penelope's arms tightened protectively around Hudson, but her voice remained steady. "Whatever you decide, we'll support you. And nothing will change between us. I'll always be your mom." Over the next few days, they learned more about Sarah Mitchell. She had been young and vulnerable when the syndicate targeted her, working double shifts to put herself through nursing school. After being forced to give up Hudson, she had finished her degree and built a life for herself in Minnesota, never stopping her quest to find her son. The decision to arrange a meeting weighed heavily on Hudson. He spent hours talking with Emily Chen, who understood something about complicated family dynamics. "It's okay to want to know her," Emily assured him. "It doesn't make you disloyal to your mum," to Penelope. When Sarah Mitchell finally walked into Culinary Crown, the resemblance was unmistakable. Hudson had inherited her eyes, her gentle smile, even the way she nervously tucked her hair behind her ear. She stopped just inside the door, drinking in the sight of her son, tears streaming down her face. "You're so tall," she whispered. In my mind, you were still a baby. The meeting could have been awkward, but Penelope's grace made it something beautiful instead. She had prepared a private lunch for them all, creating a safe space for questions, tears, and cautious hope. Sarah shared stories of Hudson's first days, while Penelope filled in the years that followed. Together they began to weave a new narrative not of loss and replacement, but of a child blessed with two mothers who loved him in different, but equally powerful ways. "I don't want to disrupt your life," Sarah assured them. I needed you to know that you were always wanted, always loved. And that giving you up was the hardest thing I've ever done." Hudson, who had been quiet for much of the meal, finally spoke. Can I call you Sarah? At least for now. Mom is Mom, but maybe we could get to know each other if that's okay." The way both women beamed at him, their joy unmarred by jealousy or resentment, told Hudson everything he needed to know about the strength of real love. As they continued talking, sharing stories and tentatively building connections, Levi watched from the kitchen doorway, marveling at how family could expand and grow in unexpected ways. The first collapse happened during a busy Friday service. Levi had been pushing himself relentlessly, working 18-hour days to keep Culinary Crown running while fighting the syndicate's legal attacks. He was expediting orders when the kitchen suddenly began to spin. Marcus caught him before he hit the ground, his face alarmingly grey beneath his usual healthy complexion. The hospital diagnosis was devastating severe exhaustion complicated by an undiagnosed heart condition. Years of stress, poor sleep, and irregular meals had taken their toll. The doctor's orders were unequivocal immediate rest and a complete step back from the restaurant's daily operations. "You need bypass surgery," Dr. Williams explained, her face serious as she showed them the test results. "The condition is hereditary, exacerbated by stress. Without intervention, you're looking at a major cardiac event within months." Penelope, who had rushed to the hospital still wearing her chef's coat, gripped Levy's hand tightly. "When can you do the surgery?" "That's the complicated part," Dr. Williams replied. "The procedure Mr. Taylor needs is specialized and expensive. Even with insurance, the out-of-pocket costs will be substantial." Levi closed his eyes, the weight of their financial situation crushing down on him. The legal battles with the syndicate had drained their reserves. The restaurant's profits were keeping them afloat, but barely. They were already struggling to pay Hudson's school fees and the mounting legal bills. "We'll find a way," Penelope declared, her voice brooking no argument. "We'll sell something, borrow if we have to." "No," Levy interrupted weakly. "We can't take on more debt. The restaurant needs you alive," she snapped, years of fear about losing those she loved bubbling to the surface. "Hudson needs you. I need you. Don't you dare give up." Hudson, who had been quietly observing from the corner of the hospital room, suddenly spoke up. "What about my college fund? The one Levi started for me when we moved in. We could use that." The suggestion hit Levi like a physical blow. "Absolutely not. That money is for your future." "You're my future," Hudson insisted, moving to stand beside Penelope. "All those talks we've had about running Culinary Crown together someday, about me going to culinary school, none of that matters if you're not there." The door opened, and Marcus entered, still in his kitchen whites. "The staff sent me to report," he said, trying to keep his tone light. "Everything's under control at the restaurant. They also wanted me to tell you they're all donating their overtime pay to help with the medical bills. Non-negotiable," they said. Levy's eyes filled with tears. "I can't accept." "You gave them all second chances," Marcus interrupted. "Hired people others wouldn't look twice at. Now it's their turn to help you." Over the next few days, news of Levy's condition spread through Chicago's culinary community. The response was overwhelming. Competing restaurants offered to host fundraising dinners. Former employees organized a GoFundMe campaign. Hudson's classmates at Lakeside Academy held a bake sale that raised thousands of dollars. But it was Sarah Mitchell who provided the crucial breakthrough. As a nurse, she had connections at a prestigious cardiac center in Minnesota. They have a research program, she explained during a visit. They're looking for patients with your exact condition. If you qualify for the study, the surgery would be covered. The catch was that Levi would need to spend at least 2 months in Minnesota for the surgery and recovery. It meant leaving Culinary Crown, leaving Penelope and Hudson, at a time when the syndicate was still a very real threat. "I'll run the restaurant," Penelope said firmly when Levi expressed his concerns. "Marcus will help. The staff is loyal. We'll manage." "And I'll keep up my grades," Hudson promised. "Sarah said I can visit on weekends sometimes. We'll make it work." The decision was made. As Levi prepared for departure, the reality of his condition finally hit him. Late one night, he found Hudson sitting alone in the dark kitchen of their apartment. "I'm scared," the boy admitted quietly. "What if something goes wrong?" Levi sat beside him, his movements already careful and measured. "Want to know a secret? I'm scared too. But being scared doesn't mean we stop fighting. Your mom taught me that." "Which one?" Hudson asked with a small smile. "Both of them. All the strong people in your life, they've taught me that real courage isn't about not being afraid, it's about doing what needs to be done anyway." The morning Levi left for Minnesota, Culinary Crown's kitchen was unusually quiet. The staff lined up to say goodbye, each having secretly prepared a dish for his journey. Penelope held herself together until the last moment, then broke down in his arms. "You come back to us," she whispered fiercely. "Whatever it takes, you fight and you come back." "I promise," Levi replied, holding her close. "After all, I still need to teach Hudson how to make my grandmother's secret souffle recipe." Hudson's goodbye was simpler but no less powerful. "I love you," he said, hugging Levi tightly. "Get better so we can cook together again." As the car pulled away from Culinary Crown, Levi watched his family growing smaller in the rearview mirror. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with medical procedures and painful recovery, but he knew he wasn't facing it alone. The love that had brought them together would give him the strength to heal and return. The first sign appeared in the window of Mario's Pizza across the street from Culinary Crown. "Tonight's proceeds go to Chef Taylor's medical fund." By the end of the week, similar notices had spread through Chicago's restaurant district like wildfire. From high-end bistros to humble food trucks, the culinary community mobilized with remarkable speed and unity. Emily Chen's mother, Detective Laura, watched in amazement as her investigation into the syndicate gained unexpected momentum. Restaurant owners who had previously been too frightened to speak began coming forward, inspired by Culinary Crown's stance. "If Chef Taylor can fight them from a hospital bed," one witness said, "we can certainly tell the truth from behind a badge." At Lakeside Academy, the response was equally powerful. The same students who had once mocked Hudson's background now wore Team Taylor buttons, organizing bake sales and charity auctions. The school board, perhaps sensing the shifting winds of public opinion, announced a new scholarship program for aspiring young chefs, with Hudson serving on the selection committee. Sarah Mitchell's nursing colleagues in Minnesota created a support network for Levi, ensuring he was never alone during his recovery. They coordinated with Chicago's medical community to arrange follow-up care, turning what could have been a logistical nightmare into a seamless system of support. Back at Culinary Crown, Penelope and Marcus found themselves managing not just a restaurant but a movement. Local farmers began delivering extra produce, refusing payment. For the soup kitchen, they'd say, knowing that even in crisis, the restaurant continued its community outreach programs. Regular customers volunteered their time, helping with everything from paperwork to maintenance. The most touching response came from the homeless community they had served. Each morning, the restaurant steps were swept clean, its windows washed, by people who had found hope in Culinary Crown's kitchens. They stood guard against vandals, directed customers to the temporary parking arrangements, and spread the word about fundraising events. Hudson, watching all this unfold, began documenting everything in a journal for Levi. "You need to see how many lives you've touched," he explained during one of their video calls. "How many people are fighting for you to get better?" The local media, which had initially sensationalized the syndicate's accusations, changed their tone. Catherine Wells, the investigative journalist who had first exposed the syndicate's activities, wrote a powerful follow-up piece, Chicago's Heart: How One Chef's Crisis United a City. Professional chefs from across the country began offering their services, volunteering to cover shifts at Culinary Crown to give the regular staff breaks. Some of the biggest names in the culinary world made appearances, drawing crowds and attention to the ongoing fundraising efforts. Even the city government, typically slow to act, found itself swept up in the movement. The mayor's office expedited permits for fundraising events. Health inspectors, no longer pressured by the syndicate's influence, worked with the restaurant to maintain standards while being understanding of the unusual circumstances. The homeless outreach program, which the syndicate had tried to use against them in the media, became a model for other businesses. Other restaurants began implementing similar programs, creating a network of support for the city's vulnerable populations. What had started as one kitchen's compassion grew into a citywide initiative. Marcus, still wrestling with guilt over his earlier betrayal, threw himself into coordinating these community efforts. His understanding of the syndicate's methods helped identify and protect other vulnerable businesses. He became a bridge between the legitimate business community and those still trying to break free from the syndicate's control. One particularly cold evening, as Penelope was closing up the restaurant, she found an envelope stuffed with cash on the counter. The note attached read, "From the street vendors you've helped. Get our friend better." The amount wasn't large, but the gesture brought tears to her eyes. Hudson's classmates organized a cook-like Crown competition, recreating dishes from the restaurant's menu. The event raised substantial funds, but more importantly, it showed how the next generation had been inspired by Levy's example of combining culinary excellence with social responsibility. The support extended beyond Chicago. Culinary schools across the country offered scholarships in Levy's name. Food industry publications ran features on Culinary Crown's impact on community building and social change. What had begun as a crisis became a catalyst for industry-wide reflection on responsibility and compassion. Sarah Mitchell's hospital colleagues created a cookbook, Healing Through Food, featuring recipes from Levi, Penelope and other chefs who had supported the cause. All proceeds went to a fund for other chefs facing medical crises, ensuring the spirit of community support would continue. As Levi watched these developments from his hospital bed in Minnesota, he realized that his personal crisis had sparked something much larger than himself. The community's response wasn't just about saving one chef or one restaurant, it was about people recognizing their power to stand together against intimidation and injustice. "You started a revolution," Penelope told him during one of their nightly calls. "Not with violence or anger, but with kindness and food. Just like you always said, a good meal can change the world." The day Hudson disappeared started like any other. He left for Lakeside Academy at his usual time, wearing his school uniform and carrying the lunch Penelope had packed. Emily Chen waited for him at their regular meeting spot, but Hudson never arrived. By noon, the police were involved. Security cameras captured the last images of Hudson outside a coffee shop 3 blocks from school. A black SUV pulled up alongside him, and 2 men in business suits emerged. There was no struggle, no obvious signs of force. Hudson seemed to go willingly, suggesting the kidnappers had said something to convince him. Penelope received the call during lunch service. Her knees buckled as Detective Chen delivered the news, and Marcus had to help her to a chair. They left a message, Laura Chen said, her professional demeanor cracking with genuine concern. "They want the evidence you've gathered against the syndicate, all of it, and they want you to drop the legal proceedings." The restaurant erupted into focused chaos. Staff members organized search parties, covering every street and alley in the neighborhood. Sarah Mitchell flew in from Minnesota immediately, bringing her medical expertise and maternal determination. Marcus, consumed by guilt over his past involvement with the syndicate, worked with Detective Chen to identify possible locations where they might hold Hudson. The hardest call was to Levi. Still recovering from surgery in Minnesota, he tried to check himself out of the hospital against medical advice. Only Penelope's tearful insistence that he maintain his strength for Hudson kept him in his bed, though he coordinated efforts from his hospital room, making calls and organizing resources. Mum Hudson's voice trembled over the phone when the kidnappers finally allowed him to call. "They say they won't hurt me if you do what they want. But don't do it, okay? Don't let them win. I'm being brave, just like you and Levi taught me." Penelope's heart shattered at her son's attempt to be strong. "We're coming for you, baby. Just hold on. Remember what we do in the kitchen when things get tough." "Break big problems into smaller steps," Hudson replied, managing a weak laugh. "I love you, Mum, both my mums, and tell Levi the call cut off abruptly." The syndicate's demands arrived through their lawyers destroy all evidence of their criminal activities, sign statements recanting previous testimony, and transfer ownership of Culinary Crown to their organization. They gave a 48-hour deadline. Detective Chen advised against complying. Once they have what they want, there's no guarantee they'll release Hudson. In fact, they'll have more reason to silence all of you. But Penelope was already gathering the documents, ready to surrender everything to save her son. It was Sarah who stopped her, gripping her hands tightly. "Wait. Hudson said not to let them win. He's counting on us to be as brave as he is." Marcus stepped forward, his face set with determination. "I might know where they're holding him. The syndicate has a warehouse they use for sensitive operations. I never knew exactly what happened there, but James mentioned it once when he was drunk, said it was where they solved problems." The next 36 hours were a blur of covert operations and careful planning. Detective Chen coordinated with FBI agents who had been building a case against the syndicate. Sarah's medical team stood by, ready for any emergency. Restaurant staff created diversions, making it appear that Penelope was preparing to comply with the syndicate's demands. "Found him," Marcus's whispered voice crackled over the police radio. He had risked everything to infiltrate the warehouse, posing as a still loyal operative. 3rd floor, east side. 2 guards. He's scared but unhurt. They've been feeding him and giving him water. The rescue operation was executed with surgical precision. FBI agents stormed the warehouse while local police secured the perimeter. The syndicate's guards, not expecting such a coordinated assault, were quickly overwhelmed. Hudson, found huddled in a small office, looked up as Penelope burst through the door. "Mum," he cried, launching himself into her arms. "I knew you'd come. I kept thinking about what Levi always says, that we're stronger together than alone." Later, safe in the hospital where doctors checked him for injuries, Hudson recounted how he'd maintained his courage. "I practiced recipes in my head," he explained. "All the steps, all the measurements. It helped me stay calm, and I knew you wouldn't give up on me." That night, as Hudson finally slept between his 2 mothers, Penelope made a video call to Levi. "He's okay," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Our boy is okay. And the syndicate, the FBI, found enough evidence in that warehouse to bring down their entire operation." "I'm coming home," Levi declared, his voice hoarse with emotion. "Surgery or no surgery, I need to be with my family." "You'll do no such thing," Hudson mumbled sleepily, opening his eyes. "Get better first. We'll be here when you're ready. We're not going anywhere, I promise." The confrontation with the syndicate took place in Culinary Crown's main dining room, of all places. Richard Kane arrived unannounced during dinner service, accompanied by James Mitchell and a team of expensive lawyers. They moved through the restaurant like a cold wind, silencing conversations and chilling the warm atmosphere. "I must admire your resilience," Kane said, seating himself uninvited at the chef's table. Most people would have broken after we took the boy. But here you are, still serving dinner, as if nothing happened." His smile was sharp as a knife's edge. Penelope, who had been expediting orders, stepped out of the kitchen. Her chef's whites were immaculate, her posture rigid with controlled fury. "You've made a serious mistake, Mr. Kane. Not just with Hudson, but with all of it." Have I? Kane's eyebrows raised in mock surprise. "From where I sit, I see a restaurant drowning in legal fees, a chef owner recovering from heart surgery, and a family that's painfully vulnerable. One more push, and it all comes crashing down." Marcus emerged from the kitchen, followed by Detective Chen and a dozen plainclothes officers who had been posing as diners. "You're right about one thing," Marcus said to his former employers. "It is all coming down, just not the way you planned." Kane's composure slipped for the first time as FBI agents entered through the front and back doors simultaneously. "What is this?" he demanded, half rising from his chair. "This," Detective Chen announced, her badge glinting under the dining room lights, "is what happens when you underestimate a family's love and a community's courage. The evidence we found in your warehouse was just the beginning." James Mitchell, looking more haggard than ever, suddenly lunged for Penelope. "You did this?" he snarled. "You turned my own brother against me, stole my son, destroyed everything." "No," James. Penelope's voice was steady as officers restrained her ex-husband. "You destroyed everything yourself. Every choice, every betrayal, every moment you chose drugs and crime over your family, those were all your decisions." Hudson, who had been watching from the kitchen doorway with Sarah, stepped into view. "It's over, Dad," he said quietly. "You can't hurt us anymore." Kane, watching his empire crumble, made one last attempt to regain control. "You have no idea what you're dealing with. One phone call, and I can still destroy everything you love." "Make your call," Marcus challenged, placing a recorder on the table. "The FBI would love to know who's on the other end. We've already identified most of your network, but a few more names would be helpful." The arrest was almost anticlimactic. Kane and his lawyers were led away in handcuffs, their threats falling on deaf ears. James, looking suddenly old and broken, stopped beside Hudson on his way out. "I'm sorry," he whispered, "for everything. I know it doesn't make up for anything, but I am sorry." Hudson nodded once, then turned away to help Penelope restore order to the dining room. Together, the staff and loyal customers transformed the scene of confrontation back into a place of warmth and hospitality. Later that night, during a video call with Levi, Penelope recounted the evening's events. "You should have seen Hudson," she said proudly. "He stood there like a rock, facing down his fears. He's so much stronger than I ever was at his age." "He gets that from you," Levi replied, his voice stronger than it had been since the surgery. "Both of you. And Sarah. He's had amazing examples of courage to follow." The aftermath of the syndicate's downfall rippled through Chicago's restaurant community. Other establishments began breaking free from their control, sharing stories of intimidation and exploitation. The FBI's investigation expanded, uncovering corruption that reached into City Hall and beyond. Culinary Crown became a symbol of resistance and triumph. Customers filled the dining room not just for the excellent food, but to show support for what the restaurant represented. The staff worked with renewed pride, knowing they had been part of something larger than themselves. Marcus, finally free from his brother's shadow and his own guilt, found peace in his role as head chef. He channeled his energy into mentoring young cooks, turning the kitchen into a place of healing and growth. The night the last of the syndicate's leaders was sentenced, Culinary Crown hosted a celebration dinner. Every table was filled with people who had helped in the fight: loyal customers, fellow restaurateurs, law enforcement officers, and community members who had stood by them through everything. To family, Penelope proposed a toast, her eyes sweeping the room. "Not just the ones we're born into, but the ones we choose and the ones who choose us." To Justice, Detective Chen added, raising her glass. To new beginnings, Marcus contributed. And from his hospital bed in Minnesota, where he was finally strong enough to begin planning his return home, Levi joined in via video call to love, which gives us the courage to fight when fighting seems impossible. In the wake of the syndicate's downfall, Culinary Crown faced an unexpected challenge, proving its legitimacy to a skeptical fine dining world. Despite the criminal organization's exposure, whispers persisted about the restaurant's involvement with them. Food critics questioned whether the drama had compromised the kitchen's standards, and some prestigious dining guides quietly removed Culinary Crown from their recommendations. "They think we're tainted," Penelope said one morning, reading through the latest industry newsletters. The prestigious James Beard Foundation had just released their annual award nominations, and Culinary Crown was conspicuously absent. "All anyone sees when they look at us now is scandal and controversy." Marcus, who had been experimenting with new menu items, placed a plate before her. "Then we'll make them see something else. We'll remind them why this restaurant earned its reputation in the first place through excellence, innovation, and uncompromising standards." The kitchen staff rallied around this mission with fierce determination. They revised every recipe, refined every technique, and scrutinized every plate that left the kitchen. Hudson, now spending his after-school hours learning from both Penelope and Marcus, contributed fresh perspectives that bridged traditional techniques with modern sensibilities. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. Catherine Wells, the journalist who had covered their struggle against the syndicate, brought Anton Reeves, the country's most feared food critic, to dinner. Reeves was known for his brutal honesty, and Impossible Standards restaurants had closed after his scathing reviews. "He's at table 7, whispered the host, setting off a wave of focused intensity in the kitchen. He ordered the tasting menu with wine pairings. Penelope took a deep breath, channeling Levy's calm leadership. "We cook the way we always do," she told the staff. "With pride, with passion, with purpose. Nothing more, nothing less." Each course that left the kitchen was a statement of defiance and excellence. The amuse-bouche, Hudson's modern interpretation of his grandmother's corn soup, spoke of heritage and innovation. The first course, Marcus's reimagined Caesar salad, demonstrated technical mastery while respecting classical foundations. As the evening progressed, Reeves's stern expression gradually softened. By the time dessert arrived, a collaborative creation that combined Penelope's French training with Levy's American creativity, he was openly smiling. 2 weeks later, his review appeared in the national press. "Culinary Crown doesn't need defending. In lesser hands, recent events might have overshadowed the food, but this kitchen has transformed adversity into artistry. Each dish tells a story of resilience, creativity, and unwavering commitment to excellence. This is more than fine dining, it's a testament to the power of passion and principle." The review sparked a renaissance. Reservations flooded in, and other critics followed Reeves's lead. The kitchen's dedication had not just preserved Culinary Crown's reputation, it had elevated it. But the true validation came from within the industry itself. Other chefs began staging in their kitchen, eager to learn not just techniques, but the management style that had created such loyalty and excellence. Culinary schools requested externship partnerships, recognizing that Culinary Crown offered lessons beyond cooking. When Levi finally returned from Minnesota, still moving carefully but with growing strength, he found his restaurant transformed. The dining room hummed with energy, the kitchen operated with precision and joy, and every plate that left the past told a story of triumph over adversity. "We didn't just survive," Penelope told him as they watched Hudson demonstrate a new plating technique to a group of culinary students. "We became something better, something stronger." The final seal of approval came when the Michelin Guide announced their annual stars. Culinary Crown had not only retained its rating but earned an additional star. The citation praised not just the food but the restaurant's role in exposing corruption and maintaining excellence under extraordinary pressure. "A star for every time they tried to break us," Marcus joked during the celebration, and failed. That evening, As the last customers departed, the staff gathered for their nightly family meal. Looking around the table at these people who had fought alongside them, who had chosen principle over profit, excellence over expedience, Levi raised his glass. "To Culinary Crown," he said, his voice strong and clear. "Not just a restaurant, but a reminder that reputation isn't given or taken, it's earned, every single day, through every single plate we serve." The strain of the past months finally caught up with them during a quiet Sunday morning at Culinary Crown. Hudson was practicing pastry techniques with Sarah, who had extended her stay in Chicago after the kidnapping. Penelope was reviewing menus with Marcus, while Levi, still adjusting to his post-surgery limitations, watched from his usual spot at the pass. The breaking point came when Hudson dropped a tray of carefully crafted chocolate souffles. The crash echoed through the kitchen, but it was his reaction that stopped everyone in their tracks. "I can't do this anymore," he shouted, tears streaming down his face. "I can't pretend everything's normal when it's not. I'm scared all the time, scared something will happen to Levi's heart, scared the syndicate will come back, scared of losing another family." The outburst unleashed a flood of suppressed emotions. Penelope tried to comfort him, but Hudson backed away. "And you, Mom, you barely sleep, you jump at every noise, but you won't talk about it. Neither of you will." Sarah moved to intervene, but this only complicated matters. "And now I have two moms, and I'm supposed to be grateful. But what if something happens and I lose you too?" What if his voice cracked, years of trauma finally breaking through his carefully maintained composure? Levi attempted to stand too quickly, wincing at the pain in his chest. This visible reminder of his vulnerability only intensified Hudson's distress. The boy fled to the walk-in freezer, his sanctuary since childhood. "Let me," Sarah said softly, following her biological son. She found him huddled among the shelves, just as she had once hidden in storage rooms during her darkest days at the syndicate's restaurant. "I know about fear," she told him, settling down beside him. "About losing family, about building new ones, about the terror of loving people when you know how easily they can be taken away." Meanwhile, in the kitchen, Penelope finally crumbled. "He's right," she whispered, sinking into a chair. "I've been so focused on being strong, on keeping everything running. I haven't dealt with any of it. The kidnapping, James, all of it, I just pushed it down and pretended I'm fine." Levi reached for her hand, his own tears falling. "And I've been so frustrated with my recovery, so angry at my body's limitations, I haven't been there for either of you the way I should be." Marcus watched this family he'd grown to love falling apart, and made a decision. He called Emily Chen, whose mother had insisted the family begin therapy after Hudson's kidnapping. Within hours, Dr. Richardson, a trauma specialist, arrived at the restaurant. Instead of traditional therapy, she suggested they cook together, but with a twist. Each person would prepare a dish that represented their fears, their hopes, their unspoken feelings. Hudson created a cracked chocolate tart, its filling still perfect despite its broken shell. "Like us," he explained. "Broken sometimes, but still good inside." Penelope made a complex French dish that appeared elegant on the surface, but revealed layers of intensity beneath. "Everything I've been hiding," she said, her voice trembling. Sarah prepared the simple comfort food she dreamed of sharing with Hudson during their years apart. Levi, limited by his recovery, contributed a deconstructed dish that spoke of patience and gradual healing. Even Marcus participated, creating a fusion dish that represented his journey from betrayal to redemption. As they shared these deeply personal creations, the walls began to crumble. Hudson spoke about his nightmares, about waking up thinking he was back in the syndicate's warehouse. Penelope admitted her constant fear of losing everything again. Levi confessed his terror of not being strong enough to protect them. "Family isn't about being strong all the time," Dr. Richardson observed. "It's about being strong enough to show your weakness, to ask for help, to let others carry you when you can't walk on your own." Over the following weeks, They established new routines, regular family therapy sessions, both individual and group, open discussions about fears and feelings. Most importantly, they learned to lean on each other without guilt or shame. Hudson began splitting his time more evenly between his two mothers, finding strength in their different perspectives and experiences. Penelope and Sarah developed a genuine friendship, united in their love for their son. Levi focused on his recovery, accepting help instead of pushing himself too hard. The kitchen adapted to his temporary limitations, creating new workflows that actually improved their efficiency. One evening, as they all sat down to their nightly family meal, now a sacred tradition that included Sarah when she was in town, Hudson looked around the table and smiled. "We're kind of like a recipe, aren't we?" he said. "All these different ingredients that shouldn't work together, but somehow make something amazing." Levi squeezed Penelope's hand under the table. "The best recipes often come from unexpected combinations," he agreed. Their family bonds hadn't just been tested, they'd been strengthened, reimagined, and expanded. They had learned that true family isn't defined by blood or circumstance, but by the choice to face life's challenges together, one day at a time. It happened during Hudson's birthday celebration at Culinary Crown. Levi had insisted on cooking despite his doctor's warnings about overexertion. The kitchen was alive with laughter and excitement as he taught Hudson the secret to his grandmother's famous chocolate cake. Penelope and Sarah watched from nearby, sharing knowing smiles as their son absorbed every detail of the family recipe. The first warning sign came when Levi missed a step in the recipe, something he'd never done before. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for the mixer, and beads of sweat formed on his forehead despite the kitchen's careful temperature control. Penelope noticed first, her chef's instinct for detail catching the subtle changes in his movements. "Maybe you should sit down for a minute." He waved off her concern, determined to finish this important moment with Hudson. "Just a little tired," he managed, but his voice sounded distant, strained. "Now, Hudson, the secret is in the timing of the..." The words trailed off as Levi's face went ashen. The mixing bowl slipped from his grasp, clattering against the counter. He reached out blindly, trying to steady himself, but his legs buckled beneath him. Marcus, working nearby, lunged forward to catch him before he hit the floor. All 911, Sarah's medical training kicked in as she rushed to Levi's side. "He's having a cardiac event. Hudson, get my medical bag from the office. Penelope, help me loosen his collar." The kitchen erupted into controlled chaos. Staff members cleared a space around Levi, and Marcus coordinated with the emergency dispatchers. Hudson returned with Sarah's bag, his young face pale but composed as he assisted his birth mother with her assessment. "Stay with us," Sarah commanded, her professional tone belying her personal fear. "The ambulance is coming. Just focus on my voice." Penelope knelt beside them, gripping Levi's hand. His skin felt cold and clammy, his pulse weak and irregular under her fingers. "Don't you dare," she whispered fiercely. "Don't you dare leave us, not now, not like this." Hudson pressed against her side, his voice small but steady. "Remember what you told me about recipes, Levi? How we have to follow all the steps? Well, getting better is just another recipe, and you haven't finished all the steps yet. You can't stop in the middle." Levi's eyes flickered open briefly, focusing on Hudson with enormous effort. He tried to speak, but no words came. The paramedics arrived, their efficient movements displacing the family as they worked to stabilize him. As they wheeled Levi toward the ambulance, Hudson suddenly broke away from Penelope's embrace. Running to Levi's side, he pressed something into his hand, the worn recipe card for the chocolate cake they'd been making. "You have to finish teaching me," Hudson insisted, his voice catching. "You promised." The ambulance doors closed, and the sirens wailed into the distance, leaving the family standing in the street outside Culinary Crown. Sarah immediately took charge, her medical knowledge providing a small measure of comfort as she explained what was happening and what they could expect at the hospital. Penelope stood motionless, staring after the ambulance long after it had disappeared from view. The weight of potential loss pressed against her chest, making it hard to breathe. The memory of another collapsed James's accident that had started their downward spiral threatened to overwhelm her. But this time was different. This time she wasn't alone. Sarah's steady presence, Hudson's quiet strength, Marcus's unwavering support, they formed a protective circle around her, holding her up when she might have fallen. "He'll make it," Hudson declared with the absolute certainty of youth. "He has to. We're not finished becoming a family yet." The arrest came without warning, 3 days after Levy's collapse. Penelope was in Culinary Crown's kitchen, attempting to maintain normalcy while waiting for news from the hospital, when Detective Chen arrived with 2 uniformed officers. Her face was grim as she approached the pass. "I'm sorry," Penelope Laura said, her professional mask cracking slightly. "New evidence has surfaced. They're charging you with conspiracy in the syndicate's money laundering operations." The handcuffs felt ice cold against Penelope's wrists. Hudson, who had been doing homework at his usual corner table, dropped his pencil with a clatter. "Mum? What's happening?" "It's a mistake," Marcus intervened, stepping between Hudson and the officers. "She had nothing to do with the syndicate's operations. I was there, I would know." But the evidence seemed damning. Bank records had emerged showing large deposits to an account in Penelope's name during her marriage to James. Documents bore her signature, authorizing transactions that the syndicate had used to clean their illegal profits. Even her sudden departure from the copper pot years ago was being reframed as a calculated move to avoid investigation. Sarah arrived at the police station within hours, having left Levy's bedside at the hospital. "Hudson needs you," she told Penelope through the visitation glass. "We'll fight this. We'll prove your innocence." But Penelope's eyes were distant, haunted. "James made me sign things," she whispered. "Papers, documents," he said. "They were for the restaurant we were going to open. I was so naive, so desperate to believe in his dreams. What if? What if I unknowingly helped them?" The news of her arrest reached Levi in his hospital room. Despite his weakened condition, he immediately tried to get up, to reach her somehow. The nurses had to sedate him to prevent him from further endangering his recovery. Hudson refused to leave the police station, camping out in the waiting area with his schoolbooks. "Mum wouldn't do this," he insisted to anyone who would listen. "She could barely keep our checking account straight when we were running from Dad. She's not some financial criminal." Detective Chen, torn between her duty and her friendship with the family, worked through the night reviewing the evidence. Something about the documents bothered her, small inconsistencies that nagged at her investigator's instincts. It was Emily who made the breakthrough. Visiting Hudson at the station, she noticed something about the signatures while helping him organize his mother's papers. "Look at these dates," she pointed out. "Mum says some of these transactions happened when your mum was in the hospital after your dad hurt her." This detail sparked a furious reinvestigation. Medical records confirmed that Penelope had been hospitalized during key dates when she'd supposedly been authorizing syndicate transactions. Handwriting experts were called in, forensic accountants reviewed the documents. The truth emerged piece by piece. James had forged Penelope's signature, using her identity to create a paper trail that would implicate her if the syndicate's operations were ever discovered. It was the perfect insurance policy, a way to control her even after she escaped. 48 hours after her arrest, Penelope walked free. But the experience had left its mark. The fear in Hudson's eyes when the officers led her away, the thought of Levy fighting for his life while she sat in a cell, the realization that James could still reach out and destroy her life, it all weighed heavily on her soul. "We need better security," Marcus declared when she returned to Culinary Crown. "Background checks on all accounts, surveillance systems, everything. They won't get another chance to frame you." Penelope nodded, but her mind was already on the hospital, on Levi, on the family that had almost been torn apart again. "First," she said quietly, "I need to see my son. And then we need to make sure Levi knows we're okay. After that, we'll make sure nothing like this ever happens again." Unlike the previous kidnapping, Hudson's second disappearance had no witnesses, no security footage, no demands. He simply vanished between visiting Levi at the hospital and his expected arrival at Culinary Crown. His backpack was found abandoned in the hospital parking garage, his phone inside still displaying an unsent message, "I know how to fix everything." "He's trying to protect us," Penelope realized, her hands trembling as she read through Hudson's recent text messages. "After Levy's collapse and my arrest, he thinks he's somehow responsible for all of this." Sarah discovered Hudson's laptop still open in his room above the restaurant. The browser history revealed searches about James's current location, the syndicate's remaining operations, and bus schedules to various cities. But most telling was a draft email addressed to both his mothers. "I'm tired of everyone getting hurt because of me. Dad only targets you because he wants me back. The syndicate uses me to control you. Even Levi pushed himself too hard trying to make everything perfect for my birthday. I'm going to fix this. Please don't look for me. I love you all." Detective Chen mobilized her entire unit, but Hudson had clearly planned this carefully. He'd withdrawn his savings in small amounts over several days, left his traceable phone behind, and used cash to purchase supplies. His time on the streets before Levi found them had taught him how to disappear. "He's 13, Sarah whispered, clutching Hudson's favorite chef's apron. "He shouldn't know how to do these things. He shouldn't feel like he has to protect us." Marcus organized the restaurant staff into search teams, coordinating with other establishments across the city. Every food truck operator, street vendor, and homeless person was shown Hudson's picture. The culinary community that had supported them through previous crises rallied once again. At the hospital, Levi fought against his doctor's orders, insisting on being discharged. "He's out there thinking he has to sacrifice himself for this family," Levi argued. "I won't lie here while my son believes he's nothing but a burden." The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Emily Chen remembered Hudson's fascination with their grandmother's old recipes. He said they reminded him of when things were simple, she told Detective Chen. When cooking was just about making people happy, not about business or crime. This led them to check security footage around the Copper Pot, Penelope's former restaurant. Sure enough, cameras caught Hudson lingering outside the now abandoned building late at night, staring through the windows at the kitchen where his mother had once taught him to love cooking. They found him in the restaurant's empty dining room, huddled in a corner with his notebooks full of recipe ideas and dreams of becoming a chef. He looked up as Penelope and Sarah rushed in, his face a mixture of determination and fear. "I thought if I left, everyone would be safe," he said, his voice small in the empty space. "Dad would leave you alone, the syndicate wouldn't have anyone to threaten, and Levi could focus on getting better instead of worrying about me." Penelope knelt beside him, pulling him into a fierce embrace. "You are not a burden, Hudson. You're the reason we fight so hard, the reason we never give up. Without you, none of this, the restaurant, our family, any of it would mean anything." Sarah joined them on the floor, wrapping her arms around both of them. "Running away doesn't protect the people you love," she said softly. "It just creates a different kind of pain. Believe me, I know." Later, in Levi's hospital room, Hudson finally broke down completely. "I just wanted everyone to stop hurting," he sobbed into Levi's hospital gown. "I thought if I was gone, then we would have lost the most important ingredient in our family recipe," Levi finished, holding him close despite his own pain. "Don't you know that by now, you're what makes all of this work?" The decision to close Culinary Crown wasn't made in a single moment, but rather accumulated through a series of insurmountable challenges. With Levi in the hospital, Penelope still shaken from her arrest, and Hudson recovering from his disappearance, the heart of the restaurant had been severely wounded. The final blow came when their insurance company, citing the recent string of incidents, cancelled their coverage. "We need to shut down," Marcus announced during an emergency staff meeting. "Not permanently, but long enough to regroup, to heal, to make sure we're strong enough to come back better than ever." The news hit the staff hard. Many had been with them through every crisis, had become part of the extended family that Culinary Crown represented. Tears flowed freely as Penelope explained the situation, but there was also understanding. They had all seen the toll recent events had taken on the family. "Take this time to rest," Penelope told her team. "When we reopen, and we will reopen, I want everyone back, stronger and ready to create something even more extraordinary." The last service was both heartbreaking and beautiful. Word spread quickly through Chicago's culinary community, and the dining room filled with loyal customers, fellow chefs, and friends who had supported them through everything. Each table received a handwritten note thanking them for their part in the restaurant story. Hudson insisted on helping in the kitchen that final night, working alongside Marcus to prepare his grandmother's recipes. "It's not goodbye," he kept saying, more to himself than anyone else. "It's just intermission, like in a play." Sarah, who had extended her stay in Chicago indefinitely, helped coordinate with suppliers and vendors, ensuring all obligations were properly handled. She worked tirelessly to maintain relationships that would be crucial when they reopened. The hardest part was telling Levi. From his hospital bed, he listened to their explanation, his face showing more pain than any physical ailment had caused. "Maybe I pushed too hard," he admitted quietly. "Tried to create something perfect without remembering that perfection isn't sustainable." Detective Chen arrived as they were locking up for the last time. "This isn't defeat," she insisted, watching Penelope turn off the lights. "This is strategic retreat. Sometimes you have to step back to move forward." The kitchen, usually alive with energy and purpose, fell silent. The equipment was carefully covered, the refrigerators emptied, the floors spotlessly cleaned one final time. Each staff member took a small memento: a spoon, a well-worn apron, a recipe card promising to return it when they reopened. In the darkened dining room, Hudson placed his hand on a table where he'd spent countless hours doing homework while watching the restaurant operate. "We'll be back," he said with absolute conviction. "This is our home. You can't just give up on home." Penelope wrapped an arm around her son's shoulders, Sarah standing close on his other side. Marcus joined them, along with the core staff members who had become family. Together they looked around the space that had held so many dreams, struggles and triumphs. "This isn't the end," Penelope declared, her voice steady despite her tears. "It's a chance to remember why we started, what we're fighting for. When we come back, it won't be because we have to prove something to anyone. It will be because this is where we belong." As they left Culinary Crown that night, the sign above the door still gleamed in the streetlights. They hadn't covered it or taken it down, a deliberate choice, a statement of intent. This wasn't surrender, it was preparation for a new chapter. The family gathered in Levy's hospital room afterward, sharing takeout food that reminded them all how much they missed their own kitchen. But there was also a sense of relief, of pressure finally released. They had time now, time to heal, to plan, to strengthen the bonds that had been tested but never broken. During Culinary Crown's closure, Marcus took it upon himself to protect the shuttered restaurant. He spent nights sleeping in the office, keeping watch over the space that had become more than just a workplace. But his vigil wasn't just about security, it was about penance, about proving to himself and others that people really could change. The turning point came when he discovered old files James had hidden in the restaurant's basement. Financial records, blackmail material, evidence of the syndicate's operations, everything they needed to completely dismantle the criminal organization. Instead of turning them over to the authorities immediately, he brought them to Hudson first. "I betrayed your trust," once Marcus told the boy, laying the files on the table between them. "I won't make decisions about your family's future without consulting you again." Hudson studied his uncle's face, seeing for the first time how much Marcus resembled James, yet how differently they had chosen to handle their pain. "You're not like him," Hudson said quietly. Dad never admitted when he was wrong. He never tried to make things right. Together, they took the files to Detective Chen. Marcus spent hours providing context, explaining connections, helping build an airtight case against his brother and the syndicate. Each revelation seemed to lift a weight from his shoulders, as if confession was slowly freeing his soul. But Marcus's true redemption came through his actions during Levi's recovery. He converted the restaurant's kitchen into a rehabilitation space, modifying equipment to accommodate Levi's limited mobility. Every morning he worked with Levi, helping him regain his strength and confidence through simple cooking tasks. Small steps, Marcus would say, supporting Levi as he practiced basic knife skills. Just like you taught me when I first started here. Every great dish begins with mastering the fundamentals. Penelope watched these sessions with growing appreciation for Marcus's patience and dedication. The man who had once plotted to destroy them was now instrumental in rebuilding their family's strength. She found herself sharing recipes with him, trading techniques, developing a professional partnership based on mutual respect. Sarah, during her visits from Minnesota, noticed the change in Marcus most clearly. "You found your true calling," she told him. "Not just as a chef, but as a healer. You're helping fix what was broken in the kitchen and in hearts." Marcus's transformation became complete when James made one final attempt to contact Hudson. Instead of delivering his brother's message, Marcus went to the prison himself. The confrontation between the brothers was brief but powerful. "I choose them," Marcus told James through the visitation glass. "I choose the family that showed me forgiveness over the brother who taught me bitterness. I choose love over revenge." When it came time to plan Culinary Crown's reopening, Marcus surprised everyone by asking to step down as head chef. "I want to teach," he explained. "We'll start a culinary program for at-risk youth, show them there's a better path than the one James and I chose." His proposal touched something deep in Levi's heart. This was what Culinary Crown had always been meant to be, not just a restaurant, but a place of transformation and second chances. "You'll always have a place here," Levi assured him. "You've more than earned it." Hudson, who had watched his uncle's journey from enemy to family member, summed it up best during a family dinner. "Sometimes the best ingredients are the ones that seem bitter at first, but turn sweet when you know how to use them properly." Marcus smiled at his nephew's wisdom, realizing that his redemption wasn't just about making amends, it was about becoming the person he was always meant to be. The letter from the prison arrived 3 days before Culinary Crown's planned reopening. James Mitchell requested a meeting with his son, his ex-wife, and his brother. The family debated the request, concerned about James's motives, but Hudson's quiet insistence made the decision for them. "I need to hear whatever he has to say," Hudson explained. "Not for him, but for me, so I can finally stop wondering if any of it was my fault." The prison visiting room was cold and sterile, but James looked even colder. Addiction and incarceration had aged him dramatically, stripping away the last vestiges of his former charm. When Hudson entered with Penelope and Marcus, James seemed to shrink in his chair. "I'm dying," he began without preamble. "Liver failure. The doctors give me a few months at most," he laughed bitterly. "Turns out all those pills finally caught up with me." Penelope instinctively moved closer to Hudson, but their son stood firm. "Is that why you wanted to see us? For sympathy?" James shook his head, his hands trembling as he placed a thick envelope on the table. "I want to tell the truth, all of it. About the syndicate, about what I did to all of you, about Hudson's mother. Everything." The confession poured out of him like poison from a wound. He admitted to deliberately targeting Penelope at the copper pot, seeing her success as a way to legitimize the syndicate's operations. But the accident that led to his addiction hadn't been entirely accidental. He'd been warned about safety violations but ignored them, too confident in his own invulnerability. "I chose the drugs over my family," he acknowledged, his voice hollow. "Every time I had a chance to choose differently, I chose wrong. I told myself it was for the business, for our future. But really it was just selfishness and cowardice." He turned to Marcus. "I knew you were my brother. I knew every time I saw you in that kitchen, watching me destroy everything you wanted. I was jealous of your talent, your integrity. So I tried to corrupt you too." Marcus's face remained impassive, but his hands clenched under the table. "You failed." "Yes," James agreed. "You turned out to be stronger than me. All of you did." He looked at Hudson, really looked at him, perhaps for the first time. "You most of all. You became everything I should have been, everything I failed to be." The envelope contained detailed confessions about the syndicate's operations, names of corrupt officials, locations of hidden assets. But more importantly, it contained a full legal acknowledgement of his crimes against his family and a relinquishment of all parental rights. "I don't expect forgiveness," James said as they prepared to leave. "I don't deserve it. But I hope this helps you build something better than what I tried to destroy." Hudson, who had remained mostly silent throughout the confession, finally spoke. "I forgive you," he said quietly, "not because you deserve it, but because holding on to hate would make me more like you. And I choose to be better." Those words seemed to break something in James. He wept openly. All pretense of strength finally abandoned. "You are better," he managed. "So much better than I ever could have been." As they left the prison, Hudson walked between Penelope and Marcus, his head high. "Can we stop for ice cream?" he asked, sounding like the child he rarely got to be. "I think we all need something sweet after that." The simple request made Penelope laugh through her tears. Even Marcus managed to smile. They had come seeking closure and found something more valuable: freedom from the shadow James had cast over their lives. Later, sharing the details with Levi and Sarah, Hudson summed up what they were all feeling. "It's like when you finally take a burned pot off the stove. The damage is done, but at least now it can't get worse, and maybe with enough care you can make something good in it again." The movement began with a simple social media post from Emily Chen. "Culinary Crown gave us more than food, it gave us hope. Now it's our turn to give back. Save Culinary Crown." Within hours, the hashtag went viral across Chicago's social networks. Local restaurateurs were the first to respond. Mario's Pizza started a Crown Night where all proceeds went to helping the restaurant reopen. Other establishments followed suit, creating special dishes named after Culinary Crown's signature items and donating the profits. The farmers who had supplied Culinary Crown organized a benefit market in the restaurant's parking lot. They supported local agriculture when it wasn't trendy, explained Tom Wilson, a longtime supplier. "They treated us like family. Now family helps family." Hudson's classmates at Lakeside Academy launched their own initiative. The Student Council organized a Taste of Tomorrow event, where young aspiring chefs could showcase their talents. The proceeds from ticket sales and a silent auction would go toward renovating Culinary Crown's kitchen. Sarah coordinated with her medical colleagues in Minnesota to create a wellness program for restaurant workers, ensuring that what happened to Levi wouldn't happen to others. The program would be based at Culinary Crown once it reopened, providing free health screenings and stress management workshops. Even the homeless community they had served stepped up. Those who had benefited from Culinary Crown's outreach program organized cleanup crews, helping to repair and paint the restaurant's exterior. Their leader, a former chef named David, spoke passionately about second chances and the power of community. Detective Chen pulled strings within the police department to expedite permits and licenses. The city council, impressed by the community's response, fast-tracked approvals for the reopening. Local trade unions offered free labor for necessary repairs and upgrades. The most touching contribution came from the restaurant's former staff. They spent their weekends helping with renovations, refusing payment. "This isn't a job," said Maria, a longtime server. "This is home. And you don't charge family for helping rebuild their home." When vendors heard about the reopening plans, they competed to offer the best terms. Equipment suppliers provided new appliances at cost. Wine distributors offered exclusive vintages. Even their insurance company, seeing the community's support, reversed its decision and offered enhanced coverage. Marcus's culinary program for at-risk youth received unexpected backing from several major foundations. They saw in Culinary Crown a model for social change through food service. The funding would allow them to offer scholarships and job training to dozens of young people. As the reopening date approached, the transformation was remarkable. The dining room gleamed with fresh paint and refinished floors. The kitchen boasted state-of-the-art equipment alongside beloved old tools that carried years of memories. But more than the physical changes, there was a new energy in the space. Penelope found herself overwhelmed by the support. "We never realized how many lives we touched," she said during a community meeting. "How many people considered themselves part of our story?" Hudson, watching the community come together, started a blog documenting the journey. "Food brings people together," he wrote, "but love keeps them together." Culinary Crown isn't just rebuilding a restaurant, we're strengthening the bonds that make us a community. Levi, growing stronger each day, saw in this outpouring of support a validation of everything they had fought for. "We always said food was about more than just eating," he observed. "It's about connection, about caring, about creating something bigger than ourselves." The night before the reopening, hundreds of people gathered for a candlelight vigil outside the restaurant. They shared stories of meals enjoyed, celebrations hosted, and kindnesses received within these walls. The message was clear: Culinary Crown belonged not just to one family, but to all of them. The full extent of the syndicate's operations came to light through James's deathbed confession and Marcus's testimony. Detective Chen's task force uncovered a network that stretched far beyond Chicago's restaurant scene, touching everything from real estate to city politics. Richard Kane, the syndicate's leader, had built his empire on a foundation of addiction and desperation. He targeted successful restaurants and businesses, using their legitimate operations to launder money from drug trafficking and illegal gambling. James Mitchell hadn't been his first victim, he was just one in a long line of talented professionals whose weaknesses Kane had exploited. They studied people, Marcus explained during a closed hearing. They knew exactly when to approach someone, what pressure points to use. With James, they waited until after his accident, when the medical bills were piling up. With others, they looked for gambling debts, family problems, anything they could leverage. The documents James provided revealed a systematic approach to corruption. The syndicate infiltrated health departments, licensing boards, and municipal offices. They didn't just bribe officials, they created compromising situations, ensuring long-term control through blackmail and threats. Detective Chen discovered that even Hudson's kidnapping had been part of a larger pattern. The syndicate regularly used family members as leverage, particularly children. They believed family ties were weaknesses to exploit, she explained to Penelope. They never understood that love could be a source of strength. Sarah's involvement with the syndicate years ago turned out to be more significant than anyone had realized. As Hudson's birth mother, she had been deliberately targeted, pressured into giving up her child so the syndicate would have leverage over James. Her escape and subsequent career in nursing had been an act of quiet defiance. The investigation revealed that Culinary Crown had been marked for takeover long before Levi reconnected with Penelope. The syndicate saw the restaurant's success and community involvement as perfect covers for their operations. What they hadn't counted on was the strength of the bonds between Levi, Penelope, Hudson, and the community they had built. Most shocking was the discovery that the syndicate had orchestrated the health code crisis that had nearly destroyed Culinary Crown. They had planted contaminated ingredients, bribed inspectors, and manipulated media coverage. The fact that the restaurant had survived was a testament to the loyalty of their staff and customers. They saw everything as a transaction, Marcus explained to Hudson as the truth emerged. They couldn't understand why people would stand together without being forced or paid. That was their ultimate weakness. The final piece of evidence came from an unexpected source. James's accident, which had started his descent into addiction, had been deliberately arranged by the syndicate. They had sabotaged the construction site, knowing that a man in pain would be easier to control than a successful businessman. As the syndicate's empire crumbled, its victims began reclaiming their lives. Other restaurant owners came forward with similar stories of coercion and manipulation. The city's culinary scene, freed from this criminal influence, began to transform into something more authentic and community-focused. For Levi, Penelope, and Hudson, the revelations brought both closure and new understanding. The forces they had been fighting were larger than they had imagined, making their victory even more meaningful. They hadn't just saved their restaurant, they had helped break a cycle of corruption that had threatened their entire community. Sometimes, Hudson reflected, the worst ingredients can lead to the best recipes. Not because they're good, but because they teach us how to make something better. The courtroom fell silent as Judge Margaret Foster delivered her verdict. In a sweeping decision, she not only exonerated Penelope of all charges but also formally recognized the systematic harassment and intimidation Culinary Crown had endured. The evidence presented demonstrates not merely individual criminal acts, Judge Foster declared, but a coordinated attempt to destroy a legitimate business and the family behind it. This court finds in favor of the plaintiffs on all counts. The ruling came with substantial damages. The syndicate's seized assets would be liquidated, with Culinary Crown and other victimized businesses receiving compensation for their losses. More importantly, the court ordered the creation of an oversight committee to prevent similar criminal infiltration of the restaurant industry. Richard Kane and his top lieutenants received lengthy prison sentences. The corrupt officials they had controlled faced their own legal reckonings. James Mitchell's testimony, given weeks before his death, proved crucial in securing convictions against the syndicate's leadership. For Penelope, the most significant victory was the formal termination of James's parental rights. The court recognized her as Hudson's legal mother, with Sarah Mitchell granted defined visitation rights as his birth mother. The arrangement officially acknowledged what they had known in their hearts, that family is defined by love and choice, not just biology. Detective Chen's investigation resulted in policy changes within the health department and licensing boards. New protocols were established to protect restaurant owners from extortion and intimidation. Culinary Crown's experience became a case study in how to recognize and resist criminal infiltration of legitimate businesses. The legal team that had defended them pro bono was honored by the Chicago Bar Association for their work. Their success established precedents that would help protect other family businesses from organized crime. Sometimes justice comes slowly, Levi observed as they left the courthouse for the final time, but it comes more surely when people stand together. Hudson, who had attended every hearing he was allowed to, gained a new perspective on the legal system. It's like cooking, he said. You have to follow the recipe, exactly all the steps, all the rules to get the right result. The victories in court marked the end of their legal battles, but also the beginning of something new. They had not just won their case, they had helped change the system itself, making it harder for others to suffer as they had. The healing began in small moments, like the first time Hudson slept through the night without nightmares, or when Penelope stopped flinching at unexpected noises, or when Levi finally managed to work a full shift in the kitchen without needing to rest. They continued their family therapy sessions not because they had to, but because they chose to. Dr. Richardson helped them understand that healing wasn't just about overcoming trauma, it was about growing stronger together. Recovery is like developing a new recipe, Levi explained during one session. You have to be patient, adjust the ingredients, and sometimes accept that the final dish might look different from what you initially planned. Penelope found peace in mentoring young chefs, particularly those who came from difficult backgrounds. Teaching others helped her reclaim the confidence the syndicate had tried to steal. She started offering special classes for domestic violence survivors, using cooking as a path to empowerment. But Hudson's healing took the form of writing. He began documenting family recipes, not just the ingredients and methods, but the stories behind them. Each entry became a celebration of their resilience, a way to transform painful memories into something meaningful. Sarah's relationship with Hudson evolved naturally. They developed their own traditions, like monthly cooking experiments where they tried to recreate dishes from her nursing school days. These sessions helped them build new memories while honoring their unique bond. Marcus found redemption in running the culinary program for at-risk youth. Every student who chose a different path from the one he and James had taken felt like a personal victory. His own healing came through helping others avoid the mistakes he had made. The greatest sign of their recovery came during a quiet Sunday dinner. Hudson was teaching Levi a new plating technique he'd invented, while Penelope and Sarah collaborated on the sauce. Marcus sat nearby, offering occasional advice. The kitchen was filled with laughter, the kind that comes naturally when old wounds have finally begun to heal. "We're not the same people we were before all this happened," Hudson observed, carefully arranging edible flowers on a plate. "But maybe we're better, stronger. Like when you temper chocolate, it goes through something difficult, but comes out more stable." Levi smiled at his son's wisdom. "And like tempered chocolate, we won't break as easily now." Culinary Crown's reopening night felt like a celebration of everything they had fought for. The renovated space gleamed with new possibilities while retaining the warmth that had always made it special. Every table was filled with people who had supported them through their struggles, loyal customers, fellow chefs, community members who had become family. The new menu told their story through food. Each dish represented a chapter in their journey. Hudson's street vendor cookies had been transformed into an elegant dessert, Penelope's survival recipes became refined comfort foods, and Levi's hospital recovery exercises inspired a series of carefully crafted small plates. The kitchen operated with renewed purpose. Marcus's culinary program students worked alongside seasoned professionals, creating a unique blend of enthusiasm and experience. The homeless outreach program had expanded, now offering job training and placement services alongside meals. "This isn't just a restaurant anymore," Levi announced to the gathered crowd. "It's a testament to the power of community, to the strength we find in each other. Every dish we serve carries that message." The critics who came to review the reopening found something they hadn't expected. Beyond the excellent food and impeccable service, they discovered a restaurant that had transformed adversity into art. Their reviews spoke not just of cuisine, but of resilience and redemption. Hudson moved confidently between the kitchen and dining room, proudly explaining dishes to guests. His original creations had earned their own section on the menu, each one reflecting both his growing skill and his unique perspective on their family's journey. The most touching addition was the community table, a long, handcrafted piece where strangers could share meals and stories. It represented everything Culinary Crown had become, a place where barriers dissolved, where healing happened over shared food, where community turned into family. But Penelope, watching the dining room buzz with life, felt tears of joy threatening to fall. "We did it," she whispered to Levi. "We really did it." "No," he corrected gently, gesturing to their extended family of staff, customers, and supporters. "They did it. We just gave them a reason to come together." The Michelin inspector, who visited anonymously later, wrote, "Culinary Crown has achieved something rare in the restaurant world. It has given fine dining a soul. Each dish tells a story of triumph over adversity, of love over fear, of community over isolation. This is more than a meal. It's an affirmation of everything good in human nature." 1 year after Culinary Crown's reopening, Hudson stood in the kitchen preparing for his first solo dinner service. At 14, he had already developed a reputation as one of Chicago's most promising young chefs. But tonight was special. He was cooking for both his mothers, Levi, Marcus, and all the people who had become their extended family. "I've learned something important," he told the gathered guests as he presented his carefully crafted menu. "Life is a lot like cooking. Sometimes the ingredients you get aren't what you expected. Sometimes the heat gets too high and things start to burn. But it's not about having perfect conditions, it's about what you create with what you have." Levi, fully recovered and prouder than ever, watched his son work with confident precision in the kitchen that had seen both their darkest moments and greatest triumphs. Family. he added, is like a complex recipe. It's not always about blood or birth, it's about who chooses to stay in the kitchen with you when the flames get high. Penelope and Sarah sat together, their initial awkwardness long transformed into genuine friendship. They had learned that love multiplies rather than divides, that a child can have many forms of family without diminishing any of them. Marcus, now running the city's most successful culinary training program for at-risk youth, raised his glass. To second chances, he said, and to the people who believe in them. Detective Chen, who had become a regular at their family dinners, smiled at how far they had come. Sometimes justice comes through unexpected channels, she observed. Sometimes it comes through a kitchen. As they enjoyed Hudson's carefully prepared dishes, each bite reminded them of their journey. The bitter had become sweet, the broken had been reformed into something stronger, and what seemed like endings had become beautiful beginnings. The real victory. Levy concluded, watching his family share food and laughter isn't in surviving the storm. It's in what you build after it passes. It's in recognizing that every scar tells a story of healing, every setback can lead to a comeback, and every broken heart has the capacity to love even more deeply. Hudson's final dish of the evening was a deconstructed version of the chocolate cake they had been making the day Levi collapsed. But now it symbolized not crisis, but redemption, not what they had almost lost, but what they had gained in fighting to keep it. The secret ingredient Hudson revealed with a smile is family. Not just the one you're born into, but the one you build choice by choice, day by day, meal by meal. And in that moment, surrounded by love and the aroma of excellent food, they all understood that their story wasn't just about overcoming adversity, it was about the extraordinary power of ordinary people choosing to stand together, to believe in each other, and to create something beautiful from life's unexpected ingredients. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey through the story of Culinary Crown. If this tale of family, resilience, and redemption touched your heart, please take a moment to share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear which moments resonated with you most. Support our storytelling team by subscribing to our channel. You'll be the first to know when we release new stories. Help us spread these messages of hope by sharing this video with friends and family who might need a reminder that second chances are possible. Don't forget to hit the like button if you enjoyed this story. Your engagement helps us continue creating meaningful content that celebrates the power of love, family, and the human spirit. Together, let's build a community that believes in the transformative power of storytelling.